SleepMatters. Moral relativism. Imagine two people standing on opposite sides of a river. The river flows quietly between them, its surface calm, reflecting the evening sky. On one side, a woman kneels beside the water holding a small bowl. She lifts the water to her lips, whispers a prayer, and drinks with reverence. On the other side, a man watches her with confusion. He was taught that the river is not to be touched after sunset, that its spirit rests then. What she sees as sacred, he sees as wrong. Who is right? This is where moral relativism begins. Not in books or theory, but in real moments when two lives collide and both believe they are doing the right thing. Moral relativism is the idea that there is no single absolute truth in morality, that what is right or wrong depends on where you are, who you are, and what your culture has taught you. It says that truth is not fixed. It is shaped by language, by tradition, by the stories passed down from parents to children. We grow up believing that morality is clear, that right is right, that wrong is wrong. But when we step into a different world, we begin to see something strange. People live by different rules. They punish things we praise. They praise things we fear. And yet, they are not evil. They are not broken. They are simply raised differently. It is easy to feel defensive here, to want to claim that our way is better, that our beliefs are more evolved, but moral relativism asks us to pause, to ask what if their truth feels just as true to them as ours does to us. Imagine a child raised in a small mountain village. She is taught that honoring her ancestors means never speaking their names aloud. To speak them would disturb their rest. To keep them sacred is to keep them silent. Now imagine a child raised in a city where remembering the dead means repeating their names every day, writing them in journals, celebrating them at dinner tables. Two different truths, both rooted in love, both deeply sincere, but entirely opposite. So how do we judge? That is the challenge of moral relativism. It makes us uncomfortable, because it asks us to step away from the comfort of clear lines. It invites us into gray areas, into uncertainty, into the deep, quiet question, can something be wrong here and right somewhere else? The awareness-amnesia paradox shows up here as well. We are aware that the world is diverse, that people are raised in different ways. But we forget that morality is not born in a vacuum. We forget that our sense of right and wrong is not pure instinct. It is learned, layered over time, etched into us by stories, by schools, by rituals we do not even notice anymore. And when we forget this, we become harsh. We judge too quickly. We assume we know what is best. But moral relativism softens us. It does not say everything is good. It does not say anything goes. It just reminds us that understanding must come before judgment, that empathy must walk before critique. It asks us to look at the river and see not just our side, but the other as well, to remember that both drink from the same water, just in different ways. Of course, this idea can feel dangerous. If everything is relative, does that mean there is no right or wrong at all? Does that mean anything can be justified? This is the tension at the heart of moral relativism. It opens our eyes but leaves us with questions. It invites us to understand, but not to abandon our values. It does not ask us to stop believing. It asks us to believe gently, to carry our truths without needing to crush others with them. Think of a traveler entering a temple in a faraway land. The rules are unfamiliar. Shoes must be removed. Silence must be held. The traveler may not understand, but they do not need to agree in order to respect. This is the spirit of moral relativism, not to erase difference, but to meet it with openness. And slowly, we begin to see that moral relativism is not about floating without direction. It is about choosing to anchor in kindness instead of certainty, in listening instead of declaring, in asking what matters most in this moment. Is it being right or being present? You can still hold your values. You can still believe deeply. But with moral relativism, You believe in a way that leaves room for others to breathe. Because sometimes the truth is not a sword, it is a mirror. And in that mirror, we see ourselves not as perfect judges, but as students, still learning, still growing, still finding our way. So the next time you meet someone who sees the world differently, pause, not to correct them, but to ask what shaped their view, what story brought them here. And in that pause, something softens. The river between you becomes smaller. And maybe, just maybe, you both drink from the same water. Determinism and free will. Picture this man walking along a narrow forest trail. His shoes crunch softly against the dirt. The trees lean overhead like ancient witnesses. He stops for a moment, standing at a fork in the path. To the left, the trail winds upward through the hills. To the right, it dips gently toward a stream. He stands there, weighing his options. He stretches, he breathes, he chooses the right path. And as he walks, he wonders, did I really choose this, or was I always going to? This is where the question begins. Do we actually make choices? Or are we following a script written by our biology, our past, and everything before that? Determinism is the idea that every action, every thought, every moment is caused by something that came before it, like dominoes falling one after another. Your decision to go for a walk, to take the right path, to think this thought, all of it may have been decided long before you ever noticed. Not by a god or fate, but by cause and effect, atoms colliding, neurons firing, memories building. A long chain with no gaps. Free will, on the other hand, is the feeling we all know so well. The sense that we choose, that we decide, that our lives are not just unfolding, but unfolding by our own hand, that we are not passengers, we are the drivers. But what if that feeling is an illusion? What if the sense of choice is simply what it feels like when the next domino falls? This is the tension between determinism and free will. It is not a new debate. It is an old fire that still burns in quiet minds. And the more we look, the stranger it becomes. You wake up in the morning, you reach for a cup of water. Why did you reach with your left hand instead of your right? Why did you even want water instead of juice? You might say it was your preference, but where did that preference come from? A memory, a feeling, a habit? And where did that come from? Every answer leads to another cause, and suddenly you are standing in a maze of reasons, a web that stretches backward beyond your birth. You did not choose your parents. You did not choose your first language. You did not choose the weather today. And yet, all these things shape your decisions. So, how much of your life is really yours? This is not meant to frighten. It is meant to reveal. Because the awareness amnesia paradox shows up here too. You are aware of making choices. You feel it. But you forget to notice how deeply your choices are shaped by things you did not choose. And when you remember that, something shifts, not into despair, but into humility, into wonder, into softness. You begin to see your life not as a race you are running alone, but as a river you are moving with. You are still moving, but maybe not from control, maybe from flow. Some philosophers try to bridge the two. They say maybe determinism is true, but that does not cancel out free will. They call this compatibilism, the idea that you can still be free, even if everything is caused. Because freedom does not mean randomness. It means acting in alignment with yourself, even if that self is shaped by 1,000 things. But the mystery remains. When you pause before speaking, when you stop yourself from reacting, when you change your mind, is that freedom or just another cause in the chain? And maybe the question is not meant to be answered. Maybe it is meant to be lived. Because when you see that life may be shaped by forces beyond your control, you begin to loosen your grip on blame, on guilt, on judgment. You see someone lash out in anger and you ask what led them here? You see your own bad habit return and you ask what formed this pattern? Not to excuse, not to surrender, but to understand. Because understanding is not weakness, it is depth. It is what happens when you stop pretending you are separate from the world and start seeing yourself as part of it. And in that seeing, something strange happens. You begin to feel more free, not because you have total control, but because you are no longer fighting the flow. You are swimming with it, and that is a different kind of freedom. A freedom that lives not in the ability to choose anything, but in the ability to accept what is and still respond with care. Because even if everything is determined, you still feel, you still love, you still grow, and those things matter. They shape the world, they ripple outward. So maybe the real question is not, do we have free will? But how will we live knowing we may not? Will we live with fear or with peace? With resistance or with surrender? Will we use this insight to become passive or to become more compassionate? The trail winds further ahead. The man keeps walking. He still wonders. But now, instead of needing an answer, he walks with the question. And the question walks with him. Utilitarianism. Picture this man standing at a train station. The platform is empty, the sky above him painted in soft early light. A train approaches slowly, its distant sound humming in the silence. But on the tracks ahead, 5 workers are fixing a broken rail. They do not hear the train. There is no time to warn them. Nearby, a lever controls the tracks. If he pulls it, the train will switch to a side track, but on that track stands one person, just one. He has seconds to decide. Do nothing, and 5 people die. Pull the lever, and one person dies to save 5. What should he do? This is where utilitarianism begins. It is the ethical idea that the right action is the one that produces the most happiness, the most well-being, or the least suffering. It sounds simple. Choose the greater good. Save the most lives. Maximize joy. Minimize pain. But under this clear surface lives a storm of complexity, because lives are not numbers, and happiness is not a math problem. Yet utilitarianism asks us to try, to step beyond feelings, and think in terms of impact, not what feels good, not what sounds noble, but what actually helps the most people, in the clearest way. It was shaped by thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. They believed morality should not be about intentions or tradition or divine command. It should be about results, about real consequences. If an action leads to more good than harm, then it is right. If it leads to more harm than good, then it is wrong. Even if your heart meant well, even if the act felt wrong in the moment. This is a powerful idea, but also a dangerous one, because it asks, what are you willing to do in the name of more good? Would you sacrifice one innocent life to save 10? Would you lie to save a family? Would you punish one person to prevent a war? Utilitarianism forces us to ask these questions without looking away. It demands a kind of moral courage that feels cold, calculating, but perhaps that is the point. Emotions can blind us. Tradition can mislead us. Maybe we need something sharper. But even sharpness has a cost. The awareness amnesia paradox appears again. You are aware of your desire to do good, to help others. But you forget to question what good really means. You forget that maximizing happiness is not the same as creating justice. You forget that not all harm can be measured, and not all value can be counted. Imagine a child losing their pet. A stranger might say, it is just a dog. But for the child, it is a world. How do you measure that? Or imagine a community losing its language. To some, it may seem like a small thing, but for those people, it is the loss of memory, identity, soul. Can that suffering be balanced against someone else's gain? Utilitarianism says yes, or at least it says we must try. But it leaves us in a place of deep tension, because sometimes the right thing can feel deeply wrong, and sometimes the wrong thing can lead to more good. This is the challenge and the trap. You begin to believe that if the numbers are right, the morality is clean. But numbers cannot feel. Only people can. So where do we draw the line? Maybe utilitarianism is not the full answer. Maybe it is a lens, a way of seeing, not the only way, but one that adds depth. It reminds us to step back, to consider the ripple effects of our actions, to think beyond ourselves. But it also reminds us that no system is perfect, that ethics is not a machine. It is a heart trying to walk through fire, and fire does not care about logic. Still, we need something to guide us. And utilitarianism offers a question worth asking in every moment: will this bring more peace, more care, more good? Not just to me, but to the whole. Even if it is uncomfortable, even if it is messy, even if it asks more from me than I want to give. Because the measure of goodness is not how it feels in the moment, it is how it lives in the world. And sometimes, the hardest choice is the most loving one. The train disappears into the distance. The man stands alone again, not sure if he made the right choice, but knowing that he tried, not to be perfect, but to be honest. And maybe, sometimes, that is the highest good we can aim for. The Euthyphro Dilemma. Picture this boy walking through a quiet garden at dusk. The sun is sinking low, and golden light spills across the path. He is alone, but he does not feel lonely. His footsteps are soft, his hands in his pockets. He pauses under a tree and looks up at the darkening sky. Then a question rises in his mind. One of those strange questions that does not come from logic or school, but from somewhere deeper. Why is good good? Is something good because it truly is, or is it only good because someone said so? He stands there, the question stretching out like a shadow. This is where the Euthyphro Dilemma begins. It is an old question, one that came from the mouth of Socrates himself, thousands of years ago. And yet it still lingers, quietly asking something deep about the nature of morality, of God, of truth. Socrates asked it like, this is something good because the gods command it, or do the gods command it because it is good? And beneath those words lives a paradox. If something is good simply because the divine commands it, then good becomes arbitrary. It could be anything. Whatever is told to us, we must follow, even if it feels cruel, even if it causes harm. Because if goodness is based only on command, then anything can be declared right. But if the divine commands something because it is already good, then goodness exists outside of that divine power. That means goodness is not created, but discovered. That even the highest being does not decide what is right, but follows something higher, a truth that exists on its own. And that idea is powerful and uncomfortable, because it asks us to think about where our morality truly comes from. Is it given, or is it found? Is it handed down, or is it always here, waiting to be seen? The awareness-amnesia paradox begins to show up here as well. We live with a sense of moral direction, a quiet compass inside, but we often forget to ask where it points from. We follow rules. We believe what we are told. We learn right and wrong from parents, books, religion, law. But behind all those voices, the question remains, are these things good because they are good, or because someone said so? The boy in the garden does not know the answer, but he feels the weight of the question. And maybe that is enough, because sometimes questions do not exist to be solved. They exist to wake something inside us, to remind us that truth is not always what we think, that belief is not always certainty. Imagine someone says, it is wrong to lie because God says so. That sounds solid, but if tomorrow that command changed, if lying were suddenly blessed, would it become good? Would you follow, or would something in you hesitate? That hesitation is the heart of the Euthyphro Dilemma. It shows us that we are not just creatures who obey. We are beings who reflect, who question, who feel our way toward truth even when it is unclear. And maybe that feeling is where real morality lives. Not in the sky, not in commands, but in awareness, in presence, in the quiet knowing that harm is harm, no matter who blesses it. That kindness is kindness, even when no one is watching, that love is right, even when it is not easy, and that knowing is not loud. It does not come with thunder or fire. It comes in the still moments, when you are alone with a choice, when no one is telling you what to do, and you ask yourself what feels true, not what feels easy, not what feels safe, but what feels real. That is not relativism. It is not chaos. It is the beginning of something deeper. It is the beginning of conscious morality, the kind that lives not in rules, but in relationship with yourself, with others, with the breath that holds all life. It does not mean you throw away faith. It does not mean you reject guidance. It means you meet it with awareness, with a mind that questions, not to rebel, but to understand. Because even faith is deeper when it is chosen, not followed blindly, but held gently. The boy walks further into the garden, the sky now dark above him, the path lit only by stars. He does not need to solve the dilemma. He does not need a final answer, because the question has done something already. It has opened space to wonder, to feel, to grow. And maybe that space is the very beginning of goodness, not a rule, not a voice from the sky, but a pause, a breath, a question that asks, what is truly right, and how do you know? And would you still know it even if no one told you? Even if the whole world believed otherwise? Would you still know? That is the challenge, and the invitation to listen, not just to others, but to yourself, to the part of you that cannot be silenced, the part that still asks and never stops listening. Existential nihilism. Picture this man standing alone at the edge of a vast desert under a moonlit sky. The wind is gentle and the air is quiet. The horizon stretches endlessly in all directions, empty and silent. He looks up at the stars. They do not blink, they do not move, just there, timeless. He wonders what it all means, not just the stars, but himself, his life, his thoughts, his dreams. He asks the question many have whispered to themselves in the silence of night, what is the point of all this? And in that moment, something heavy begins to settle in his chest, a strange weight, not made of sadness, but of space, as if the more he looks, the more he realizes. There may be nothing there, no grand reason, no final meaning, no deeper truth behind the curtain, just life, and then not life. This is the beginning of existential nihilism, the idea that life has no inherent meaning, that there is no deeper reason why we are here, no divine script, no cosmic plan. That we are born, we live, we die, and the universe continues, silent and unchanged. It can feel like a dark idea, but it is not always a sad one. It is a mirror. And like all mirrors, it reflects what you bring to it. Existential nihilism is not depression. It is not despair. It is a lens, a way of looking, a question that strips away all the noise and asks, if there is no meaning given to you, will you still live? Will you still love? Will you still create? Will you still show up? Because meaning is not missing. It is just not handed to you. You have to make it. And that is what makes this idea both terrifying and freeing. Terrifying because it removes the ground you thought you were standing on. Freeing because it tells you that the ground was never needed to begin walking. The awareness-amnesia paradox returns here in its fullest shape. You are aware of your desire for purpose, for direction, for answers that feel bigger than you. But you forget that even that desire is something built, something learned. You forget that before you asked why, you were simply being, breathing, laughing, wondering. Children do not ask for meaning. They play, they feel, they cry, and then laugh a minute later. They are not looking for purpose. They are living it. But as we grow, the world teaches us to search for a reason, for a path, for a place where everything makes sense. And when we do not find it, we panic. Existential nihilism meets that panic and says maybe you are not supposed to find it. Maybe it was never out there. Maybe it was never fixed. Maybe meaning is not a treasure to be discovered, but a light to be lit by you, in small ways, in quiet acts, in simple presence. This can feel like a loss, but maybe it is a return to raw being, to doing something not because it matters forever, but because it matters now, to making tea, to holding a hand, to breathing in and knowing that this breath is not a step towards something, it is something. Maybe this is not emptiness. Maybe it is clarity. Maybe it is the moment when you stop waiting for life to explain itself and begin living it without the need for explanation. Because maybe you are not here to find meaning. Maybe you are here to give it, to paint it into the world with your presence, to carve it softly into time with your actions. Not because the universe demands it, but because you can. That is the quiet rebellion at the heart of existential nihilism. It does not say, give up. It says, let go. Let go of the need for everything to add up. Let go of the belief that your worth comes from something outside you. Let go of the story that says life must be meaningful to be beautiful. And in that letting go, something opens. A space, a silence, a freedom. To live as if nothing matters and still choose kindness. To act as if there is no reward and still choose courage. To love without needing it to last forever and love even more deeply because of that. The man at the edge of the desert still feels the weight in his chest. But now he sees it differently. It is not a burden. It is a vastness. It is space to create, to move, to exist without pressure, without needing to prove anything. He smiles, just a little, not because he found the meaning, but because he no longer needs to. He turns back from the edge and walks into the night, each step quiet, each breath real, and that is enough. The trolley problem. Picture this woman standing beside a quiet railway track. The air around her hums with stillness. In the distance, a trolley rushes toward her. It is not a normal day. It is not a normal moment. Ahead on the tracks, 5 people are tied down and unable to move. They do not see the trolley. They do not scream. They just lie there, unaware of what is coming. To the right, there is a side track. On that track, only one person is tied down, and beside the woman is a lever. If she pulls it, the trolley will switch tracks. 5 will be saved. 1 will be lost. If she does nothing, 5 will die. 1 will live. There is no time to explain, no time to ask questions, only a decision, 1 lever, 1 choice, 1 breath. What would you do? This is the trolley problem. It is one of the most famous thought experiments in ethics, simple in design but deeply complex in meaning. It asks not just what you would do, but what your choice says about your understanding of morality, about value, about responsibility. Do you let the trolley go forward and allow 5 people to die? Or do you pull the lever, save them, and accept that you caused the death of 1? Neither choice is clean, neither is free from pain, and that is the point. Because the trolley problem is not really about trains. It is about decisions, about how we weigh human life, about whether intention matters more than consequence, about whether doing nothing is truly neutral. Some would say, of course you pull the lever, save the many, sacrifice the 1. It is simple math. 5 lives are worth more than 1. This view reflects utilitarian thinking. Maximize good, minimize harm. But others hesitate. They say the moment you pull the lever, you become responsible. You chose to kill. You interfered. And in that interference, even if more lives are saved, you crossed a line. You turned 1 person into a means to an end. And that discomfort, that tension, is the heart of the problem. It reveals how difficult ethics can be when no option is good, when every path leads to loss. The awareness-amnesia paradox gently appears here too. You are aware that life is full of choices, but you forget how many of those choices are not between good and bad, but between two kinds of pain, two kinds of sacrifice, two kinds of imperfection. And that is what makes the trolley problem so powerful. It takes away the illusion of a perfect answer. It reminds us that sometimes morality is not about being right, it is about being present with the weight of what is wrong, and choosing anyway. The woman at the tracks does not want to be here. No one does. But life does not always wait for ideal moments. Sometimes we are asked to make decisions when the world is not ready, when our heart is still unsure, when the consequences feel too heavy for our hands. But the hands are still ours, and the choice still comes, and the trolley still moves. What makes this dilemma even more difficult is how it changes when small details shift. What if the one person on the track is a child? What if the 5 are strangers and the 1 is your sibling? What if instead of a lever, you had to push someone onto the track to stop the trolley? Each version makes the decision harder. Each layer adds emotion, and emotion complicates ethics. Because we are not machines, we do not make choices from math alone. We make them from memory, from attachment, from fear, from hope. So what seems logical in theory becomes unbearable in reality. This is not a flaw, it is part of being human, and maybe, just maybe, ethics is not meant to erase that humanness. Maybe it is meant to include it, to say, yes, this is hard. Yes, this hurts. And still, we must choose. Not because we know the right answer, but because life keeps moving, and the trolley keeps coming. Some philosophers have tried to create systems for these choices, rules, frameworks, moral codes. But no system can remove the ache from the heart of the trolley problem, because at its core, it is not about solutions. It is about confrontation. It confronts us with the truth that every action has cost, that goodness is not always clean, that sometimes, to protect life, we must touch death. And perhaps that is why the question matters so much. Because in asking it, we remember that life is precious, that people are not numbers, that decisions carry weight, and that behind every moral choice there are real lives, with names, with stories, with loved ones waiting at home. So what would you do? Would you pull the lever? Would you freeze? Would you close your eyes and wish for someone else to decide? There is no right answer. But there is a right question. Will I act from fear or from care? Will I choose to hide or to stand in the ache of the moment and be as honest as I can be? Not perfect, just honest. The woman on the tracks closes her eyes. The wind rises. The sound of the trolley gets louder. And still, there is time. Not much, but just enough to breathe, just enough to feel, just enough to remember that being human means facing the impossible and still trying to choose with love. Panpsychism. Imagine this woman sitting beside a lake just before sunrise. The air is still, the water flat like glass. A single leaf floats past her, carried by the slow current. She watches it gently spin. A bird lands on a rock. A fish breaks the surface. Somewhere nearby, the wind moves through trees like a whisper. She places her hand on the ground. The earth is cool beneath her skin. And then, quietly, the question comes, what if all of this is aware? Not just the bird, not just the fish, but the rock, the water, even the leaf. What if everything that exists has some kind of mind? This is where panpsychism begins. It is the idea that consciousness is not limited to humans or even animals, but is a fundamental feature of the universe itself, that everything, in some deep and quiet way, has experience. Not thought, not memory, not language, but awareness. Even the tiniest particle, even the stillest stone. Panpsychism is not a new idea. It is ancient, older than science, older than philosophy. It lived in the stories of early people who saw spirit in every mountain and soul in every stream. But in modern times, it returns in a new form, as a possible answer to one of the biggest questions: where does consciousness come from? Science can explain the body, the brain, the signals and systems, but it struggles with the mind. With the feeling of being, the experience of now, the part of you that sees, that hears, that feels not just with senses but with presence. Why do we feel alive? Why do we feel anything at all? Some say it is an illusion, a trick of evolution, a side effect of complexity. But others ask, what if it is not an illusion? What if it is a clue? What if the reason consciousness is so hard to explain is because it does not come from matter, it is part of matter? Panpsychism suggests that awareness is not added to the universe later, it was always there. In every atom, in every cell, in every flicker of light, but not awareness as we know it. Not human awareness, not reflection or decision, just a faint pulse, a soft hum of being. Like the quiet background music of existence. This idea sounds strange at first. It feels like a dream. But sit with it. Let it breathe. And something inside you might begin to shift. You look at the tree and think, what if it feels the sun? You look at the rock and wonder, what if it dreams in stillness? You feel the wind on your face and sense maybe it is not just touching you. Maybe it is here with you. Not just matter, but presence. Panpsychism does not say that everything is thinking. It says everything is feeling, in its own way, with its own language. And that idea changes how we live, how we walk through the world, how we treat what we once believed was silent. Because if everything has experience, then everything matters, not just what is useful, not just what is beautiful, but what simply is. The awareness-amnesia paradox enters here as well. You are aware of your own mind, your own thoughts, but you forget that awareness may not belong only to you. That maybe it is not something you possess, but something you participate in, something shared, like a sea in which all things float, and in that remembering, something softens. You stop looking at the world as a collection of objects. You begin to see it as a community of presence, of being, of aliveness, and this changes things. You walk through a forest not as a visitor, but as a neighbor. You sit beside a river, not as a watcher, but as a companion. You live not above the world, but within it. Panpsychism does not demand belief. It invites wonder. It does not ask for proof. It asks for attention, for stillness, for the kind of listening that does not need words. And maybe that is the deepest kind of listening, the kind that hears what cannot be spoken, because maybe the world is not shouting, maybe it is whispering, always has been, but we were too loud to notice. Now, something is changing. We are beginning to feel it again. The hum, the pulse, the quiet presence in all things. And whether it is true or not, it offers us a gift, a way of living with reverence, a way of moving through life as if it is sacred, not because it has to be, but because it could be. And in that could, we find care, we find love, not for what we own, but for what we share. This breath, this moment, this place. The woman at the lake stands up slowly. The sun begins to rise. The light touches everything. And in that light, nothing feels lifeless. Everything feels awake. Philosophical skepticism. Picture this man walking through a quiet museum late at night. The halls are empty. The lights are dim. Around him stand ancient statues and faded paintings, each holding a story older than memory. He moves slowly, his footsteps soft against the polished floor. He stops in front of a sculpture carved from stone centuries ago. He stares at it, and then, without warning, the thought arises, how do I know any of this is real? Not just the statue, not just the museum, but everything. How do I know that the floor beneath me is solid? How do I know that I am awake? How do I know that what I see is truly there? And with that, a quiet door opens in his mind. A door into something unsettling, something vast, something called philosophical skepticism. It is the practice of questioning everything, even the things that feel most obvious. Not to be cynical, not to be difficult, but to ask, how do we know what we know? Most of the time, we trust our senses. We see a tree and we believe the tree is there. We feel pain and believe the pain is real. We remember something and assume it happened. But what if those senses are wrong? What if memory can be false? What if the world we see is just a dream? These are not the questions of someone lost in fantasy. These are the questions that live at the core of philosophy. Questions that ask not what is true, but how we know truth at all. The earliest skeptics did not claim that nothing exists. They simply said, before we claim to know, let us look more closely. Let us pause. Let us doubt, not to destroy belief, but to test it, like tapping a wall to see if it is hollow, like looking twice to be sure. Philosophical skepticism is not about never believing anything. It is about never settling too quickly, about leaving space between experience and conclusion. The awareness amnesia paradox visits here too. You are aware that your mind forms beliefs, but you forget how quickly those beliefs take hold, how easily they become truth. You hear something once and it sticks. You see it from one angle and you trust it. And then that trust becomes your reality. Skepticism reminds us, maybe reality is deeper than your first glance. Maybe truth is more slippery than it seems. And this can be uncomfortable, because we like knowing. Knowing feels safe. Doubt feels loose. It makes the ground shift. But maybe that shifting is not weakness. Maybe it is wisdom. Because when you doubt, you are awake. Not just awake to facts, but awake to the limits of your own knowing. That kind of doubt is not confusion. It is clarity. It is saying, I see something, but I will look again. I believe something, but I will hold it gently. I know something, but I will not worship that knowing. Because truth is not a possession. It is a process, a journey. And on that journey, skepticism is your lantern. It lights your path not by telling you what is real, but by helping you see what might not be. And in that seeing, you begin to walk differently, with humility, with openness, with curiosity, not rushing to conclusions, not clinging to certainty, but exploring, feeling your way through the fog. And maybe, just maybe, that fog is not the enemy. Maybe it is the sign that you are finally seeing how complex the world really is, that you are stepping out of the illusion of clarity and into the honesty of not knowing. Some might say this is dangerous. That too much doubt leads to nothing. But skepticism is not about paralysis. It is about pause. It is the space between question and answer, the breath before belief. And in that space, you are free. Free to unlearn, free to change, free to say I was wrong. And in that freedom, you grow. You evolve. You become not just a thinker, but a seeker. And seekers do not stop. They do not settle. They do not hold on too tightly. They move through life with open hands, willing to listen, willing to learn, willing to let go. The man in the museum walks to another room. He looks at a painting. The colors seem to shift under the dim light. He wonders who painted this, why, and how much of what I see is what they saw. How much of what I believe is shaped by what I expect. He does not have answers, but he smiles, because maybe the point is not to know. Maybe the point is to ask, to stay in the question, to stand in front of life the way he stands in front of this painting, quiet, present, curious, and aware that everything he sees is filtered through the lens of his own mind, not to distrust that mind, but to honor it by questioning it. To treat thought not as a final word, but as a starting point. And in that way, every moment becomes a doorway into deeper seeing, into better listening, into truth, not as a fixed place, but as a moving river, always flowing, always changing, and always waiting for you to notice not what is, but what might be just beneath. Antinatalism. Picture this man sitting alone on a rooftop at night. The city stretches quietly below him, glowing with distant lights. He is not sad, not angry, just still. The wind moves through his hair as he looks up at the stars. He thinks of his childhood, of laughter and tears, of growing up, of love and fear. Then the question comes, if life is filled with so much pain, should we keep bringing more people into it? He does not say the question aloud, but it lingers, in the air, in the silence, in the space between breaths. This is where the idea of antinatalism begins. It is not a movement of hate or bitterness. It is a quiet, philosophical view that suggests something simple and deeply controversial, that bringing new life into existence may not be an act of kindness, but an act of harm. Not because life is always bad, not because people are not strong, but because pain is guaranteed, and no one consents to being born. This idea challenges everything we are used to believing. From childhood, we are told that life is a gift, that existence is something precious, that having children is part of the natural path. But antinatalism pauses that belief. It asks us to look again, to ask, is life truly a gift if it comes with suffering? Every person born will one day face fear, loss, illness, disappointment, death. No one escapes these things. And while joy exists too, antinatalists ask, does the joy outweigh the harm? If we know someone will suffer, and we create them anyway, is that loving, or is it selfish? These questions are not comfortable. They are not meant to be. They are meant to wake something inside us, to look more deeply at the nature of life, to challenge the automatic belief that existence is always better than non-existence. And it does not stop there. Because once the question is asked, more follow. If we have children because we want to love, is it truly love to create someone who must one day die? If we hope our children will be happy, is that hope strong enough to carry them through their pain? If the world is already heavy with suffering, do we help by adding more lives to carry it? These are not easy questions, but they are honest ones. The awareness-amnesia paradox rises here as well. You are aware that life can be painful, that suffering is everywhere, but you forget how deeply we normalize it. How often we say things like that is just how life is, as if the pain is something we must pass on, as if existence is a debt we owe to the world. Antinatalism asks, what if we do not? What if the greatest kindness is not giving life, but letting peace remain? That does not mean stopping love. It means expressing love in other ways, through care, through presence, through creating beauty without creating more bodies to bear it. This idea often meets strong resistance. People say, but life has joy too. But we can make the world better. But what about the beauty of being? And those are valid points. Antinatalism does not deny joy. It simply asks if the risk of pain is too great a price. It does not say people should not live. It says we should question why we create more life when we know it comes with guaranteed harm. And in that questioning, something softens, not into despair, but into responsibility, into the quiet strength of choosing not to add to the fire, even when the flames are beautiful. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest watching smoke rise. You love the trees, you love the light, but the fire is coming, and every new spark adds to the heat. Would you still strike a match? Or would you watch and weep and choose to hold the match in silence? Antinatalism is that silence, that pause, that breath before continuing a pattern simply because it has always been followed. It is not against life. It is for reflection, for deeper care, for asking, is it enough to mean well? Or must we also consider what our choices create? Because life is not just birth. It is pain. It is aging. It is illness. It is dying. And all of it happens to someone who never asked to be here. That is the weight of the view, and also the power of it. It returns us to the question, is the potential for joy worth the certainty of harm? Some will say yes, some will say no. But the question matters, because in asking it, we see the depth of our impact. We see that love is not just about bringing people into the world, it is about protecting them from it. And sometimes, the deepest form of protection is the choice not to create the pain in the first place. The man on the rooftop does not have all the answers. He does not know what others should do. He only knows that the stars above him are quiet, and that silence feels more honest than any promise of joy. He breathes, he watches, and for a moment he feels at peace not because life has meaning, but because he has chosen to question what meaning we give to life. And in that questioning, he finds clarity, not in answers, but in the courage to ask. The simulation hypothesis. Picture this man sitting alone in a cafe, staring out through a rain-covered window. People pass by with umbrellas. A bell rings when someone enters. Coffee machines hiss in the background. He watches the world move the way drops race each other down the glass, the way strangers glance at their phones, the way the lights above him hum without rest. And then he feels it a question. Quiet. Strange. Almost silly at first. What if none of this is real? Not the people, not the rain, not the sky or the walls or the sound of his own breath. What if everything around him, including himself, is part of something built not by nature, but by code? This is where the simulation hypothesis begins. It is the idea that everything we experience, our senses, our memories, our world, might not be the base reality, that we could be living inside a massive, complex simulation, not a metaphor, not a dream, but a system, a program, something designed by another intelligence, something that feels real because it was meant to. The idea is not just science fiction anymore. It is a serious question being explored by thinkers, scientists, and philosophers. It asks if a civilization became advanced enough, would they not eventually create simulations of conscious life? And if they did, would the beings inside those simulations know they were simulated? If the simulated minds could think, feel, suffer, love, what would make their experience less real than ours? And suddenly, the question flips. Not just could we be in a simulation, but what reason do we have to believe we are not? Because everything we know through experience, through our senses. But senses can be fooled. Eyes can be tricked. Memories can be shaped. If the simulation is perfect enough, you would never know you were inside. The awareness-amnesia paradox returns once again. You are aware that your experiences feel real, the taste of your favorite food, the feeling of music in your chest, the ache of a broken heart. All of it feels deeply true. But you forget how easily reality can be mimicked. How much of your world is already made of symbols, systems, patterns. You see color, but it is just light interpreted by your brain. You hear sound, but it is just vibration filtered into meaning. You touch something, but the atoms never truly collide. So what is real, and how would you know if it was not? The simulation hypothesis does not tell us we are in a simulation. It simply reminds us that we cannot be certain that we are not. That possibility alone opens a door in the mind. What if every detail of your life is part of a code? What if your memories were uploaded? What if every star in the sky is just a line of data? What if death is not the end, but a reboot? It sounds strange. But what if it is stranger still to assume we are the only base reality? That we are the highest form of existence? The simulation hypothesis humbles us. It reminds us that we may not be the top of the ladder, but part of the pattern. And that pattern may be repeating. Like echoes inside echoes, each layer believing it is real, each mind wondering what lies above. But it also does something else. It makes us question value. Because if this is a simulation, does that make our feelings less important? Does it make love less true? Does it make kindness meaningless? Or does it make it more meaningful? Because even in a world built by code, beauty still moves us. Pain still touches us. We still laugh. We still cry. So maybe it is not the source of reality that gives it meaning, but our response to it. Whether real or simulated, the sunset is still beautiful. The hug still matters. The silence between two people still speaks louder than words. Maybe the simulation hypothesis is not about doubt. Maybe it is about depth. It asks, what do you hold on to when you are not sure what is real? What would you still choose, even if none of it lasted? Even if the walls were just pixels and the sky was a ceiling? Would you still love? Would you still create? Would you still try to be kind? If the answer is yes, then maybe that is your truth, not what the world is made of, but how you meet it. And if we are in a simulation, then someone built it. For a reason. Maybe to study, maybe to explore, maybe out of curiosity, or maybe, just maybe, for beauty. Maybe we are not experiments, maybe we are art, and maybe that makes us sacred in a different way, not because we were born of nature, but because someone, somewhere, imagined us. And if we are imagined, then we are also chosen, created with intention, with care, even with love. The man in the cafe blinks. The rain still falls, the world still moves, and he still does not know what is real, but he smiles. Because maybe he does not need to. Maybe the question is enough. Maybe the wonder is the point. He finishes his coffee, stands up, and walks into the wet morning light, and as he goes, he carries the question with him, not as fear, but as a quiet invitation to see the world with softer eyes. Moral luck. Picture this man driving home late at night. The roads are empty, the sky dark. His hands rest gently on the wheel. He is calm, focused, a little tired but not careless. As he turns a quiet corner, something unexpected happens. A child runs into the road. He slams on the brakes, but it is too late. The sound echoes in his ears. The world slows down. A moment ago, he was just another man going home. Now, everything is different. Now imagine another man, in the same situation, same road, same speed, same calm attention. But in his version, the child never runs out. Nothing happens. He drives home safely, unaware that anything could have gone wrong. Both men made the same choices, but only one faces consequences. Only one is judged. Only one carries guilt. This is where moral luck begins. It is the idea that the morality of our actions can depend on things beyond our control, that who we are and how we are judged is shaped not just by what we choose, but by what happens around us, by timing, by coincidence, by luck. It feels unfair, because we want morality to be clean. We want to believe that if you intend to do good, then you are good, that if you mean no harm, then you are safe from blame. But life does not work like that. Life is messy. And sometimes, two people walk the same path and only one trips, and yet we blame the one who falls. We call him reckless. We question his choices. We wonder why he was not more careful, even though he did nothing differently, even though it could have been any of us. This is the quiet cruelty of moral luck. It blurs the line between choice and chance. It asks how much of who we are is really ours. The awareness-amnesia paradox shows up here as well. You are aware of your own intentions. You believe you are a good person, but you forget how easily others are judged for things they could not control. You forget how quickly we point fingers when someone else makes a mistake, and how rarely we remember the role that luck plays in our own safety. Imagine a doctor makes a decision in an emergency. It is the right call, based on what they know, but the patient dies. Another doctor makes the same call. Their patient lives. Who do we praise? Who do we blame? We do not blame the luck, we blame the person, even though the person may have done everything right, even though the outcome was never fully in their hands. Moral luck asks us to look deeper, to see that judgment is not always fair, that we often punish outcomes more than intentions. And this is not just about rare events. It is about every day, about how some people are born into safe places, with strong support, with second chances, while others are born into struggle, into danger, into systems that break them before they even begin. And when they fall, we say they should have made better choices. But What if they never had the same choices? What if their fall was not failure, but inevitability? Moral luck challenges the stories we tell ourselves about justice, about effort, about worth. It reminds us that not all success is earned, that not all failure is chosen. And that makes many people uncomfortable, because we like to believe in fairness, in control, in the clean idea that good people do good things and bad people do bad things. But the truth is softer, more complicated. Sometimes good people do bad things by accident. Sometimes bad people never had another way. And sometimes everything depends on a moment that could have gone another way if only the light had turned red a second earlier. If only the child had stayed on the sidewalk. If only the doctor had seen the chart a minute sooner. So what do we do with this? Do we stop judging entirely? Do we say nothing matters? Number, we keep caring, we keep trying, but we do it with humility, with awareness, with the understanding that luck is always part of the story, and that compassion must grow in the space where control ends. The man who hit the child was not evil. He was unlucky, and that does not make the pain go away. It does not erase the tragedy, but it changes how we hold him, not as a monster, but as a human, like us, capable of mistake, caught in the same storm of cause and effect, trying to do the right thing in a world that does not always reward it. And maybe when we understand moral luck, we begin to soften, not just toward others, but toward ourselves. We forgive more quickly. We judge more slowly. We remember that who we are is shaped by where we are, by when we are, by what we could not have seen. And in that remembering, we become more honest, more careful, more kind. The man sits quietly in his car now. The road behind him feels heavy. He did not mean to harm anyone, but harm was done. And all he can do is carry it, with care, with sorrow, with the quiet hope that maybe, in another version of the world, the light turned red just in time. The experience machine. Picture this woman standing in a white room. The walls are smooth. The air is quiet. In front of her is a chair. Wires hang from the ceiling. A voice speaks gently from behind the wall. It says, "If you sit in this chair, we will connect you to a machine. A perfect machine. One that can give you any experience you want. You can live a life filled with joy, with adventure, with love and peace and endless satisfaction. You will not know it is a machine. You will believe it is real. Every emotion will feel true. Every moment will feel full. No pain, no loss, just the life you always dreamed of. But there is one rule. Once you go in, you can never come back. Would you do it?" This is the question behind the experience machine. A thought experiment imagined by philosopher Robert Nozick. A test, not of technology, but of values. What do we really want from life? Is it the feeling of happiness, or something deeper? At first, the answer seems easy. Of course we want happiness. Who would not want a life of joy without suffering? No struggle, no heartbreak. Just a stream of perfect days. But when we look closer, something strange happens. Many people say no, they would not enter the machine. Why? Because even a perfect life, if it is fake, somehow feels empty. Even if we never know it is fake. Even if every moment feels real, there is something in us that resists the illusion. That says, I want my life to mean something beyond just how it feels. I want it to be real, to matter, to be connected to truth. The awareness amnesia paradox shows itself here again. You are aware that pleasure feels good, that joy is desirable. But you forget that meaning is not always pleasurable. That struggle is not always suffering. That truth, even when painful, gives depth to life that pure comfort cannot. Imagine two people. One lives in the machine. She wakes each morning feeling loved. She believes she is changing the world. Her days are filled with laughter and peace. But it is not real. The people are not real. The world is not real. The other lives in the real world. She faces failure, loss, boredom, But her moments are hers, her choices are true, her victories are earned, and even her sadness is honest. Which life is better? There is no easy answer. But the question reveals something deep. We do not just want to feel good, we want to be good. We want our lives to be tied to something beyond illusion, to something that reflects reality, not just fantasy. This does not mean we reject joy. It means we value authenticity. We want our experiences to be connected to something outside our minds. We want to touch the world, not just imagine it, even when it hurts, even when it disappoints us. Because in that touch, we grow, we learn, we become. The experience machine tempts us with control, with certainty, with safety. But real life does not offer those things. And maybe that is its gift. Because what is love without risk? What is success without effort? What is beauty if it is always perfect? The machine removes risk, removes effort, removes pain. But in doing so, it also removes the very things that shape us, that stretch us, that make us human. You do not grow when everything goes right. You grow when you are tested, when you fall and rise again, when you face something real and still choose to keep going. The woman in the white room thinks quietly. She wonders, would happiness still matter if I knew it came from a machine? Would it still feel like mine? And that is the heart of the dilemma. We want to feel good, but we also want to feel true. And sometimes the truest moments are not the easiest ones. They are the ones we earn, the ones we survive, the ones we remember not because they were perfect, but because they were real. The experience machine gives us pleasure, but it takes away story, it takes away surprise, it takes away the unknown. And without the unknown, can there be wonder? Can there be awe? Can there be growth? We are not just creatures who seek pleasure. We are storytellers. We are builders. We are beings who long for connection, not just sensation. And that connection comes from reality, even when it is hard, even when it is painful, because only in reality can we truly meet each other. Only in reality can we truly meet ourselves. The machine may offer everything we want, but it cannot offer who we are, because who we are is not created by comfort. It is revealed through challenge. The woman looks at the chair one last time. She smiles gently. Then she turns and walks away, not because she does not want happiness, but because she wants her happiness to mean something. She wants it to be hers, not programmed, not imagined, but lived, felt, chosen, even when it hurts, even when it is uncertain. Because in the end, maybe life is not about escaping pain. Maybe it is about discovering who we become when we face it. Epiphenomenalism. Picture this man staring out his bedroom window on a rainy afternoon. Drops streak down the glass like tiny messengers, each following its own quiet path. He rests his chin in his hand, watching cars move slowly below. His thoughts drift from one thing to another. A childhood memory, a strange dream, a sudden desire for tea. He blinks. He stands up. He walks to the kitchen. And then it hits him, did my thought cause my action? Or did my action simply follow? Did I decide to move because I wanted tea? Or did the movement come first, and my mind created a story after? This is where epiphenomenalism enters, silent and strange. It is the view that consciousness, our thoughts, our feelings, our sense of inner life does not cause our actions. It only follows them, like smoke from a fire, like an echo that does not change the sound. Our mind is real but passive. It watches, it narrates, but it does not control. At first, this feels impossible. How can something so vivid, so central to who we are, be powerless? Surely when you choose to speak, to smile, to reach out, that choice came from you. But what if the body moves first? What if every action is set in motion by brain activity, by chemical events you do not see, by processes that happen before you are even aware? What if your mind only becomes aware after the choice is already made? Imagine a shadow following a person down a street. The shadow mirrors every step, every turn, every pause. It looks like it is walking, but it is not walking. It is being dragged by light, by shape, by motion that is not its own. Epiphenomenalism suggests that our thoughts are like that shadow. They exist, but they do not drive the movement. They only reflect it. This idea challenges everything we believe about free will, about control, about identity. If we are not the ones making the choices, then what are we? Observers? Spectators? A mind sitting inside a body that runs on autopilot? The awareness-amnesia paradox floats gently here, like a fog. You are aware of your thoughts. You feel like the author of your choices. But you forget how automatic much of life is. How your hand moves before you decide. How your heart races before you know why. How your words sometimes leave your mouth before your mind can catch them. Science has started to echo this too. Some studies show that brain activity can predict a decision seconds before a person becomes conscious of making it. As if the choice begins in silence and thought arrives late, writing the story after the fact. So if thought does not cause action, why does it exist at all? What is the point of a mind that cannot act? Some say it is just a side effect, a result of complex systems, like a rainbow appearing when sunlight hits water. It is beautiful, it is fascinating, but it does not change the world. It simply reflects something deeper. Others wonder if our experience of thought, even if powerless, still matters. Because even if it cannot move the body, it still feels, it still dreams, it still suffers, it still loves. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the mind does not need to control to matter. Maybe it is not the driver, but the witness. Not the painter, but the eye that sees. And in that seeing, there is value, because witnessing brings awareness. Awareness brings depth, and depth brings meaning. Not meaning that moves the world, but meaning that touches it, that honors it, that holds it. Epiphenomenalism asks us to consider a quieter kind of self, one that does not command, but listens, one that does not shape the world, but feels it fully. This does not mean we are trapped. It means we are flowing, like a leaf in a river, not directing the current, but still part of its beauty, still carried, still present. And maybe presence is the gift. Not power, not control, but presence. To feel life unfold, to be awake to its unfolding, to see the storm and know we are not steering it, but we are inside it, and that too is sacred. The man returns to the window with his cup of tea. He watches the rain. He does not know if his mind caused his hand to move, or if his hand moved and the thought followed, but the warmth of the tea is real. The rain is real. And his awareness of it all, even if passive, is deeply, profoundly alive. Maybe that is what matters, not what starts the motion, but that something within us still sees it move, still feels it, still remembers. And in that remembering, even a powerless mind finds its own kind of quiet power. The problem of evil. Picture this boy sitting at the edge of a hospital bed. His sister lies beneath a blanket, her breathing slow and quiet. Machines hum softly around her. Outside the window, the world goes on as if nothing is wrong. Birds fly, clouds drift. A nurse walks by, smiling kindly. But inside the boy's heart, something heavy grows. He looks up and whispers, "If there is a loving and all-powerful God, why is this happening?" It is not a question of science. It is not a question of faith alone. It is a question of suffering, and why it exists. This is where the problem of evil begins. It is one of the deepest and most painful questions in all of philosophy. If God is all-knowing, all-loving, and all-powerful, then why does evil exist? Why do children suffer? Why do wars rage? Why do people die in pain and loneliness and fear? Why does the world break in so many ways? Some people say everything happens for a reason, but the boy in the hospital cannot find the reason. Some say suffering is a test, but he wonders what kind of love gives tests like this. Some say it is part of a bigger plan. But no plan feels big enough to justify this kind of pain. The awareness-amnesia paradox begins to show itself here. We are aware that suffering is part of life. We know pain. We see loss. But we forget how deeply it challenges the idea of goodness, especially divine goodness. We forget how hard it is to hold faith in love when love seems so absent from the world around us. Philosophers have tried to answer this problem for centuries. Some say evil is necessary for free will, that without the ability to choose wrong, we could never truly choose right, that without darkness, there would be no meaning to light. But this explanation can feel thin when pain is not chosen, when it comes not from freedom, but from accidents, from illness, from disasters. Others say evil is part of the mystery, that we as humans cannot understand the full picture, that from our limited view, suffering seems cruel, but from a higher view, it might serve some hidden good. But this too brings little comfort to the boy who just wants his sister to live. And maybe that is the true weight of the problem. Not just that evil exists, but that it exists in a world where so many still believe in goodness, still pray, still hope, still ask why. It is easy to dismiss this question in theory, to debate it with distance, but in practice, in lived experience, it breaks the heart. Because when someone suffers, no answer feels big enough. No theory erases the tears. No logic stops the pain. So what do we do? Do we give up on the idea of a loving God? Do we give up on meaning? Do we accept that the world is just random chaos and that suffering is simply part of the storm? Some do. Some find peace in accepting that life has no deeper reason, that it just is. Others continue to believe, not because they have all the answers, but because they cannot let go of hope, because even in a world of pain, they have felt kindness. Even in the face of death, they've seen love. And maybe that is the paradox, that the same world that holds so much evil also holds moments of incredible beauty, of selfless care, of courage, of grace. Maybe the problem of evil does not have a final answer. Maybe it is not a riddle to be solved, but a tension to be lived. A space where questions stay open, where belief does not mean certainty, where doubt is not the enemy of faith, but its companion. Because true faith, perhaps, is not the belief that everything happens for a reason. It is the choice to act with love, even when no reason is clear. To comfort the sick, to feed the hungry, to hold the hand of someone in pain. Not because we understand why suffering exists, but because we refuse to let it have the last word. The boy sits quietly by the bed. He does not know what to believe, but he stays. He holds his sister's hand. He tells her a story. He sings to her softly. And in that moment, maybe he becomes the answer he was searching for. Maybe love is not the reason suffering happens. Maybe love is what we do in response to it. And maybe that is enough. Not to explain everything, but to make the pain a little less alone, to make the darkness a little less cold, to bring light, even when the night feels endless. That is the problem of evil. And that is the quiet power of the ones who keep loving anyway. Libertarian free will. Picture this man standing at a quiet crossroads deep in a forest. There is no map in his hand, no signs to guide him. Two paths lie ahead. One fades into the hills, winding between tall pines. The other dips toward a stream, curving gently through soft grass. He stands still for a moment. Then he looks up, breathes slowly, and begins to walk. No push, no pull. Just a choice, his choice. But is it really? Did he choose the path freely? Or was he shaped by memories he cannot see? This is where the idea of libertarian free will steps in quietly, but with conviction. It is the belief that human beings have genuine freedom, not the kind of freedom that simply means doing what you want, but a deeper freedom, the power to do otherwise, the power to choose between real alternatives, to stand at the crossroads and say, I will go this way, but I could have gone the other. It is the belief that we are not just passengers on a train of cause and effect. not just dominoes falling in a line, but agents, beings with will, with control, with a spark of self-direction that no chain of events can fully explain. Many people believe in this without question. It feels natural. When you pause before speaking, when you resist a temptation, when you decide to forgive, it feels like something real is happening inside you. A moment of choice, a turning of the wheel, a motion not caused by anything else but you. But philosophers have asked, is that feeling real? Or is it just a story? Some argue that every choice we make is shaped by causes we do not control, by genes, by history, by chemistry, by chance, that even the choice at the crossroads is not really free, because the man's preferences were shaped by years of unseen experience, because his brain activity began before he became conscious of deciding. But libertarian free will says no. It says we are not completely caused. We are not just reacting to the past. We are creating the future, moment by moment. With every choice, even when the reasons are unclear, even when the choice feels small, even when no one is watching. And this idea changes how we see ourselves. Because if libertarian free will is true, then we are not just what happens to us. We are what we choose to become. Responsibility becomes real. Guilt becomes real. But so does growth. So does change. So does redemption. You are not stuck in the story. You are writing it. And every moment is a fresh page. The awareness-amnesia paradox enters gently here, like a breeze through the trees. You are aware that you choose. You feel it in your bones. But you forget how often you move on autopilot, how quickly habits return, how much of your life unfolds without conscious thought. And yet there are moments, clear, quiet moments, when you stop, when you breathe, when you choose something different. And those moments matter, because they remind you that freedom is not constant, it is not easy, it is not always available, but it is real. And when you step into it, something shifts. You are not a product. You are a process. You are not a result. You are a source. And that source is what libertarian free will protects, the sacred idea that deep within you is a power to begin, to start, to say yes or no, not because of fate, not because of force, but because of something uncaused, something only you can bring into the world. That power is fragile. It needs awareness. It needs honesty. It needs courage, because real freedom means responsibility. It means accepting that your choices shape not just your path, but the world around you. And sometimes that is heavy. But it is also beautiful, because it means you matter. Not just what you do, but that you do it freely. The man walks further into the forest. He does not look back, not because he had to choose this path, but because he chose it. And that choice, that simple, quiet motion of the will, may be the most mysterious, most powerful thing in the universe. Not lightning, not thunder, just one person standing still, then moving forward because they decided to. The paradox of tolerance. Picture this man opening the door to a small town meeting hall. Inside, the air hums with voices. People from all walks of life are gathered, different beliefs, different customs, different pasts. They have come together to talk, to share, to listen. The man takes a seat in the back. He believes in freedom, in letting people speak their mind, in creating a space where everyone feels safe to be who they are. But then, something shifts. A man stands up and begins shouting hateful things. He mocks others. He threatens. He demands that those who are different should be silenced, or, worse, removed. Some people shake their heads. Others stay silent. And in that silence, the room begins to feel colder. Now the question rises, if tolerance means accepting all views, should we also accept views that want to destroy tolerance? This is the beginning of the paradox of tolerance. It was first clearly spoken by philosopher Karl Popper. He said if a society is unlimited in its tolerance, then its ability to be tolerant will eventually be destroyed by the intolerant. Because if we allow hatred to grow freely, it will not stop. It will silence others. It will take over. And once it does, tolerance dies. So the paradox is simple to see but difficult to live. To keep tolerance alive, we must be willing to be intolerant of intolerance. And that sounds strange, even harsh. But what it means is this tolerance is not weakness. It is not a free pass for harm. It is a space where different ideas can breathe, as long as those ideas do not wish to take away the breath of others. This is not about disagreement. It is not about argument. It is about protection. About knowing when speech turns into poison, when words become weapons, when beliefs stop being personal and start being dangerous. Because history has shown us what happens when intolerance is left unchecked. It grows. It spreads. And soon, the voices of love, of reason, of unity are drowned out. The awareness-amnesia paradox lives here too. You are aware that kindness and openness are good. But you forget that not everyone shares that goal. You forget that some people use the freedom of speech not to share truth, but to silence it, not to connect, but to dominate. And in that forgetting, you risk becoming passive. And passivity allows intolerance to take root. So what can we do? How do we protect tolerance without becoming tyrants ourselves? The answer lies not in shutting down every voice we disagree with, but in setting a boundary. A quiet, firm boundary that says you may speak your truth, but not if your truth calls for the harm or erasure of others. That is not censorship. That is care. Because real tolerance is built on respect. And respect cannot survive where hatred is allowed to bloom unchecked. Some people fear this boundary. They worry it means losing freedom. But freedom without limits is not freedom. It is chaos. And chaos does not protect the weak. It favors the loud, the cruel, the unkind. So if we wish to build a world where everyone can live freely, we must be strong enough to say, not here, not this. Not the kind of speech that seeks to break others. This is not a call for control. It is a call for balance, for understanding that in order to hold space for many voices, we sometimes have to quiet the ones that aim to crush the rest. It is not easy. It will never be. But it is necessary. The man in the back of the room listens as the shouting continues. Then he stands up. His voice is calm. He says, I believe in listening. I believe in freedom. But this room is not a place for hatred. If your words aim to harm, they do not belong here. Some people nod. Some look away. But the air begins to shift again, not towards silence, but towards strength. Because tolerance, real tolerance, is not soft, it is not passive, it is fierce, it is courageous. It is the kind of love that protects, not by closing doors to difference, but by guarding the door against destruction. And maybe that is the heart of the paradox. That to be truly open, we must be willing to close the gate to those who would burn the field, not with anger, but with clarity, not with fear, but with care. Because tolerance is not about allowing everything. It is about allowing what allows others to live, to speak, to be. And when something threatens that, it is not intolerance to stop it. It is the deepest form of protection. The man leaves the meeting that night with a quiet mind. He did not enjoy confronting someone. He did not want to silence anyone. But he knows if we want a world where many can speak, we must sometimes stand against the one voice that wants silence for all the rest. And maybe, just maybe, that is what real tolerance looks like. Solipsism. Imagine this boy walking through an empty town at dawn. The streets are quiet. The shops are closed. The sky is soft and pale with early light. As he walks, he hears his own footsteps echo off the walls. He passes houses where people might still be asleep, but he cannot hear them. He cannot see them. For a moment, a strange thought settles into his chest like a slow whisper. What if none of them are real? What if the world only exists when I look at it? What if every voice I hear, every hand I touch, every smile I meet, what if all of it is just a part of me? This is where solipsism begins. It is not madness, it is not arrogance, it is a quiet philosophical idea, one that asks, how can we know that anything exists outside of our own mind? We know our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences. We know pain. We know joy. We know the sound of our own inner voice. But beyond that, how do we know that anything else is real? You see a tree. You touch its bark. You hear the rustling leaves. But all of that happens in your mind. You feel. You process. You believe. But you never step outside your own mind to confirm that the tree is truly there, outside of your experience. Solipsism holds up a mirror and says, what if all that you experience is not a reflection of the world, but a construction of your own mind? What if you are alone, truly alone? This idea can be haunting. And yet, it asks an honest question, one that no other person can truly answer for you. Because everything you know about others comes through you, through your senses, through your thoughts, through your own awareness. You believe in other people because they speak, they laugh, they cry. But what if that speaking, that laughing, that crying is just another part of your internal world? You have never stepped into their minds. You only imagine what they must be like, what they must feel. And that imagination could be beautiful, or it could be an illusion. The awareness-amnesia paradox finds its place here too. You are aware of your own mind, but you forget how deeply alone that mind is, how every word you hear is filtered through your awareness, how every sight and sound is not the thing itself, but your experience of it. Solipsism does not claim that no one else exists. It just asks how you would know if they didn't. It is not meant to isolate you. It is meant to open a deeper reflection, to ask what it truly means to be aware, to exist, to feel the world move within you, and to wonder, is there a world beyond this mind? Some find this idea uncomfortable. They say, surely the world exists. Surely others are real. Look at the stars. Listen to the wind. Feel the warmth of another hand. But even these experiences, solipsism reminds us, are still internal, still yours, still live through the only window you truly have, your own consciousness. This does not mean the world is fake. It does not mean others are lies. It simply means we cannot prove otherwise, not with full certainty. And in that uncertainty something deep stirs, not despair, but mystery. The idea that everything you have ever known, every place you have ever been, might be the dream of a single mind, your mind. Not a dream in sleep, but a dream in waking. A dream with logic, with rules, with patterns. But still a dream, still yours. So what do we do with that? Do we retreat from the world? Do we stop believing in others? Number. Because whether the world is real or imagined, it still matters. Because you still feel, still care, still love. And maybe that love, whether shared with others or imagined within yourself, still carries weight, still brings light, still gives meaning. Solipsism does not demand loneliness. It invites humility. It reminds you that everything you know is known through you, and that your mind, though vast, is not infinite. There may be more, there may be others. But even if not, you can still choose how to move, how to speak, how to create, how to be kind. Even if the world is you, you are still shaping it. You are still part of something beautiful. The boy walks further into the town. He passes a woman walking her dog. He nods. She smiles. Maybe she is real. Maybe she is not. But the smile still warms him, still touches something quiet inside. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the truth is not whether the world is real. Maybe the truth is how you meet it, with wonder, with care. With the soft courage of someone who knows that even if everything is just a dream, it is a dream worth living. The veil of ignorance. What if you were told that tomorrow you would be born again, not as yourself, but as someone completely different, and you have no idea who or where you will be. You could be rich, you could be poor. You might be born in a peaceful place or in the middle of war. You could be healthy or struggling with illness from the first breath. You might be male, female, someone of a different race or religion, someone powerful or someone powerless. Now imagine you are given a task before this new life begins, to design the rules of the world, the structure of society, how wealth is shared, who has rights, what is fair, what is allowed. But here is the twist: you must decide all this without knowing who you will be. This is the idea behind the veil of ignorance, a powerful thought experiment created by philosopher John Rawls. It asks, what would justice look like if none of us had any idea where we would land? Not just in theory, but truly, if we were behind a veil, completely blind to our identity, our future, our strengths, or our struggles. The idea is simple, but profound. If you do not know whether you will be born rich or poor, you are more likely to build a world that protects the poor. If you do not know whether you will be born into a minority group or a majority, you are more likely to build a world that protects minorities. If you do not know whether you will be powerful or powerless, you are more likely to create fair laws, shared opportunities, and safety for all. Because fairness becomes personal, not just something to wish for others, but something to ensure for yourself, whoever that self may be. The veil of ignorance removes bias. It silences the voice inside us that says, well, I'm fine, so the system must be fair. It forces us to see with wider eyes, to feel with deeper empathy, because it strips away our current place and asks us to design the world not from where we stand, but from the possibility of any place. The awareness-amnesia paradox appears gently here, like a lesson whispered in a dream. We are aware of our own comforts. We trust our experiences. But we forget how much our views are shaped by where we sit in society. What seems fair to the one who has everything may feel cruel to the one who has nothing. The veil asks us to forget ourselves for a moment so that we can remember everyone else, not as them, but as maybe me. It is a mirror, but not one that shows your reflection. It shows what you would believe if you were not you. It asks, how would you build a world if love meant making it kind for anyone? This idea has been used in debates about equality, politics, healthcare, education, and rights. Because it does not tell you what justice is, it lets you feel it. It invites you to step outside your own skin, your own past, and ask, if I were born again tomorrow, what kind of world would I hope to wake up in? Would I want a safety net in case I am born into poverty? Would I want freedom in case I am born into a place where my voice is small? Would I want peace in case I am born into fear? Suddenly, things become clear, not just as ideas, but as choices, not just about others, but about yourself. Because the truth is, none of us chose who we are, not where we were born, not the language we speak, not the family that raised us. These things were handed to us by chance, and the veil of ignorance reminds us that we could have been anyone, so maybe we should live as if we were. This does not mean erasing difference. It means honoring it. It means understanding that justice is not built for the fortunate, but for the fragile, for the ones who carry weight that no one sees, for the ones who live at the edges. And when we protect them, we protect the humanity in all of us. The boy designing the world behind the veil does not know if he will be a king or a farmer, a scholar or a child without access to books. So he creates a world with fairness, with kindness, with space for each voice, not because he is perfect, but because he might be the one who needs that kindness most. And maybe we all do, in ways we cannot always see, in ways we may not admit. So the veil is not just a thought experiment. It is a lens, a way of seeing, a reminder that fairness is not about what benefits us now, but what would benefit us if we stood somewhere else. It is not about guilt or shame. It is about design. About asking, before we build laws or systems or opinions, what if I wake up tomorrow and I am not who I am today? Would I still believe what I believe? Would I still defend what I defend? Or would I build something gentler, more balanced, more just? The veil does not tell you what to think. It asks you to think wider, to build not just for yourself, but for the stranger who might be you. And in that imagining, justice begins to grow, quietly, deeply, like a seed planted not for today, but for all the possible tomorrows we cannot yet see. Speciesism. What if the only thing that determined how you were treated, whether you were loved, hurt, protected, or ignored, was the shape of your body? Not your thoughts, not your feelings, not your ability to suffer, or care, or remember, just the species you were born into. Would that feel fair? Would that feel right? This is the question at the heart of speciesism. It is the belief, often unspoken, that one species, usually humans, is more important than all others, simply because of what they are. Not because they feel more, not because they think more, but because they are human, and this belief shows up quietly, everywhere, in how we treat animals, in what we eat, in what we wear, in what we protect, and in what we destroy without a second thought. Imagine this girl walking through a field at sunset. A small dog follows her, tail wagging. In the sky, birds glide silently. Cows graze nearby. Crickets sing in the grass. She stops to pet the dog, smiling. She loves him. She feeds him. She talks to him like a friend. Then, just a few steps away, she sees a chicken in a wire cage. The chicken flaps her wings, restless and anxious. The girl looks at the bird, then looks away. Something in her heart tugs. But she has been taught not to think about it too much. Because this is how things are. Because this is what we do. Because this is normal. Speciesism is the name for that normal. The system that decides worth based on species alone. It is the belief that being human gives us the right to control, use, and harm other animals, even if they feel pain, even if they suffer, even if they want to live. It is not based on logic. It is based on habit, and comfort, and convenience. The awareness-amnesia paradox lives here, quietly in the background. You are aware that animals feel. You see it in the eyes of your dog when he is scared. You hear it in the cry of a calf when she is taken from her mother. But you forget, or are taught to forget, when it becomes uncomfortable, when it becomes part of your meal, your clothes, your choices. We love animals. We fear cruelty. And yet we support systems that are built on suffering not because we are cruel, but because we have been told not to see. Speciesism is not about hate. It is about blind spots, and asking what would happen if we removed them, if we saw the pig not as bacon but as a being, if we saw the fish not as food, but as someone who wants to escape the hook, if we saw animals not as property, but as persons in their own way living, feeling, experiencing the world. Some say, but animals are not like us. They cannot speak, they cannot reason, they cannot make art or build cities. But others ask, are those the right measures? Do we really believe that the ability to talk makes someone worthy? Do we believe that intelligence decides who deserves to live in peace? Because if we do, then what about humans who cannot speak, or who live with mental disabilities? Are they less worthy? Of course not. Because we know deeply that worth is not about power or ability. It is about being alive, being aware, being capable of pain and joy, and animals have all of that. So speciesism asks us to look again, to question not just what we do, but why we do it, to ask if this cow were my dog, would I treat her the same? If this chicken were a child, would I turn away? It is not about guilt. It is not about shame. It is about seeing clearly and choosing with care. Some people say, but humans are more important. We are more advanced. We have souls. But what if importance does not mean domination? What if advancement means responsibility? What if having more power means using it gently, kindly, with awareness. Because the more we understand about animals, the clearer it becomes they are not objects. They are not tools. They are not ingredients. They are lives. And when we hurt them without need, something in us hardens. Something gentle goes quiet. Speciesism is the name for that quiet, for the silence we create when we separate ourselves from others who feel. And it does not just harm animals, it harms us. Because the more we divide, the less we connect. The more we justify harm, the easier it becomes to ignore suffering. But there is another way. A way of presence, of asking who is this, really? Not what are they for, but who are they? What do they want? What do they fear? What would happen if we chose to care? The girl in the field kneels beside the chicken's cage. She looks into the bird's eyes. She does not hear words, but she feels something. Something simple, something real. And maybe, in that feeling, something opens. Not just her heart, but her awareness. And that is the beginning, not of perfection, but of change. Of waking up from the quiet spell of speciesism. Of remembering that kindness is not limited by shape or species or sound. It is a choice, a moment. A way of seeing the world not as a ladder, but as a circle. And in that circle, no one is above, no one is below. We are simply here, together. The is and ought problem. What if someone told you, this is how things are, so this is how things should be? Would you believe it? Imagine a young man watching the ocean from a quiet pier. He sees waves rising and falling, the tide moving in its rhythm, uncaring and consistent. A fisherman nearby says, "See that? The strong fish eat the weak. That's just nature. That's how the world works." The man nods. Then the fisherman says something else. "And because that's how nature works, it's okay when people do the same." The man pauses. Something about that feels wrong, but he cannot quite say why. This is where the is and ought problem appears softly, like a shadow stretching across the floor. It is a question of logic, a warning about assumptions, and it was made famous by the philosopher David Hume. The idea is simple at first, but sharp once you understand it. You cannot move from describing what is to saying what ought to be, without something in between. You cannot say, people lie all the time, and then conclude, so lying is fine. You cannot say, animals hurt each other in the wild, and then decide, so cruelty is natural for humans. You cannot leap from facts to values, at least, not without a bridge. And this is the trap we fall into again and again. We confuse what is common with what is right. We mistake what exists for what should exist, because it is easier that way. It feels easier to believe the world is how it should be instead of asking whether we should change it. But the is and ought problem reminds us description is not justification. Just because something is a certain way does not mean it is good, or moral, or fair. You can describe the world in great detail. You can say there is inequality, there is poverty, there is corruption. And those may all be facts, but you cannot stop there. Because if you do, you risk accepting those things as normal, as natural, as permanent. You risk saying, it is this way, so it ought to be this way. And that is the moment when the mind begins to drift, not toward clarity, but toward comfort. The awareness-amnesia paradox flows quietly through this, too. You are aware that the world is full of habits, patterns, repeated cycles, but you forget that those cycles are not destiny. They are not sacred. They are just what has happened, not what must continue. The is and ought problem tells us to pause, to ask for the missing piece. If something is a certain way, why should it stay that way? Why should it be accepted? Why should it be praised? And if we want to say something should change, we need reasons, not just facts, but values, principles, compassion, vision, because facts describe, but values direct. And if we don't think carefully, we begin to smuggle values into our facts without knowing we did. We begin to say things like, men have always led societies, so they should. People have always fought wars, so they will. Greed is part of human nature, so there's no point resisting it. And each of these is a slide down a gentle slope. A slope that starts with truth, but ends in resignation. The is and ought problem says slow down. Facts are not instructions. History is not morality. Science is not ethics. They are powerful, but they are not the same. You can describe how the heart beats, but that does not tell you how to treat the people you love. You can describe how humans evolved, but that does not tell you how to raise a child with care. You can describe the brain's impulses, but that does not tell you what is right or wrong. And that space, the space between is and ought, is where philosophy lives. It is where ethics grows, where choice matters. Because if we simply accept the world as it is, we give up the power to shape it, to question it, to rise above it, and sometimes we must. Because the world is not always kind, nature is not always fair, history is not always wise. And if we want a better world, we cannot just describe what exists, we must imagine what should. That takes courage, that takes care. It takes the ability to hold two truths at once. Yes, this is the way things are. And no, this is not the way things must be. The young man on the pier continues to watch the waves. The fisherman smokes quietly beside him. The ocean is vast. Its rules are ancient. But the man knows, just because the sea is wild does not mean we must be. Just because the strong survive does not mean the strong must always win. We are not only products of what is, we are also builders of what ought to be. And maybe that is where the real beauty of philosophy lies, not in explaining the world, but in challenging it. In saying, we see what is, but we will not stop there. We will ask why. And more importantly, why not something better? Cognitive biases. Imagine this woman sitting at a table with 2 job applications in front of her. She reads through both. One has a familiar name, the other does not. Without meaning to, her mind leans toward the familiar name. It feels safer. It feels better. She tells herself she's being objective, but something in her mind made the decision before she even knew it. What just happened? This is the silent power of cognitive biases, invisible shortcuts in our minds, patterns we do not notice, thoughts that shape our decisions before we even begin to think. Cognitive biases are not mistakes in intelligence. They are patterns of thinking that once helped us survive, but now often lead us astray. They are part of being human, not flaws in the machine, but features that no longer fit the modern world. And the most dangerous part is this: we almost never see them happening. They live in the background. They whisper, not shout, and they shape how we see the world. You meet someone new, and within seconds, you like them. Why? Maybe they remind you of someone. Maybe they look confident. Maybe you are in a good mood. You read a news article that agrees with your opinion. You nod, feel validated, and move on. You see another that challenges you, and you dismiss it as wrong before even reading. You watch a coin land heads up 5 times in a row, and you start to believe tails must be next, even though each flip is still 50-50. These are all cognitive biases. They are not always harmful, but they are always present. They are the autopilot of the mind. The awareness-amnesia paradox hides here, too. You are aware that you are a thinker, a chooser, a reasoner. But you forget how often your thoughts are not chosen, how often your brain fills in blanks without asking you, how often your logic is built on feelings you never examined. There are many types of biases. The confirmation bias is one of the most common. It leads you to search for and believe information that supports what you already think and ignore anything that challenges it. It feels good. It feels safe. But it traps you in a loop. The more you believe something, the more you find proof of it, even if that proof is weak, even if the truth lies elsewhere. Then there is the availability bias. Your brain gives more weight to information that comes easily to mind. If you hear about a plane crash on the news, flying suddenly feels dangerous, even though it is still one of the safest ways to travel. Your brain confuses memorable with common. Another is the anchoring bias. You see a shirt that costs $200. Then you see one for $100, and it feels like a bargain, not because it is cheap, but because your brain is anchored to the first number. The anchor becomes a silent comparison point, even if it is random. There is also the halo effect. If someone is good-looking, your brain is more likely to believe they are kind, smart, capable, even if you know nothing else about them. One positive trait casts a glow over everything else, and the Dunning-Kruger effect, where those with less knowledge overestimate their ability, while those with more knowledge often underestimate themselves. Confidence is not always a sign of competence, but your brain may not notice the difference. These are just a few, but the truth is, every mind carries hundreds. Little mental rules, invisible assumptions. They help us move quickly through life, but they often blind us. They affect how we vote, how we shop, how we judge others, how we see ourselves. And they are not easy to escape, because they feel natural, they feel like truth. But they are often just habits, shadows, reflections. So what can we do? We can slow down. We can learn to question our first thoughts, not to reject them, but to examine them. To ask, why do I believe this? Where did this feeling come from? What might I be missing? Awareness does not erase bias, but it softens its grip. It makes space for clearer thinking, for better choices, for compassion toward ourselves and others, because we all carry these biases. They do not make us bad. They make us human. But they also remind us that truth is not always where it seems to be, and fairness is not always what feels fair. And understanding takes more than instinct, it takes reflection. The woman at the table pauses. She looks again at the applications. This time she covers the names. She reads only the content, the words, the skills, the person behind the paper, and maybe now her mind is a little quieter, a little clearer. Because bias does not vanish, but it can be seen, and once seen, it begins to lose its power. The Sorites Paradox. Imagine this man holding a single grain of sand between his fingers. Just one. He drops it onto a table and says, "This is not a heap." Then he adds another grain. Still not a heap. He adds another, and another, and another. At what point does it become a heap? Is it after 10 grains? 50? 1,000? The strange thing is, no single grain seems to make the difference. But at some point, without anyone noticing, something changes. And what was just a pile of individual grains becomes a heap. A small shift becomes a category. A vague border becomes a label. This is the Sorites Paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap. It begins with something so simple, adding one grain at a time, and ends with a deep question about how we define the world around us. Because if one grain does not make the difference, then how can any number of grains ever become a heap? But we know they do. We see the shift. We feel it. We use these ideas every day. But we rarely stop to ask where the change truly happens. The Sorites Paradox shows us that our categories, our labels, our definitions are often built on fuzzy lines. We act as though the world is made of clear-cut concepts, that things are either tall or short, rich or poor, old or young. But where is the dividing line? When does someone become rich? Is it at 1 million? At 10 million? Or is it when they have more than someone else? What about baldness? If you pluck one hair from someone's head, they are not bald. If you pluck another, still not bald. But keep going at some point, they are bald. Yet no single hair seems to be the turning point. This is the trap. The Sorites Paradox reminds us that vague concepts can create deep confusion when pushed to their limits, and it does not only live in word games or philosophy textbooks, it lives in law, in ethics, in how we judge others, in how we judge ourselves. The awareness-amnesia paradox slips in quietly here too. You are aware that life is made of gradual changes, that growth is slow, that decline is subtle. But you forget how easily we use sharp labels to describe soft transitions. You forget that every big thing is just a lot of little things put together, and that makes the world harder to see clearly. Because we crave certainty. We want to say this is this, and that is that. But the Sorites Paradox asks, what if there is no clean line? What if the line is a blur? What if every category is just a story we use to make sense of the slow drift of reality? And still we must live. We must decide. We must draw lines, even if they are imperfect. We need language. We need labels. But we also need to hold them gently, to remember that the edges of our ideas are soft, that no one becomes wise in a day, no one becomes cruel in a moment. No relationship breaks in one fight, no identity forms in one choice. Change is quiet, change is slow, change is made of grains. The Sorites Paradox is not about confusion, it is about humility. It asks us to remember how fragile our definitions are, how carefully we must tread when deciding what someone is or is not. Because in the space between not yet and now it is, lies the mystery of becoming. Imagine this in the way we judge morality. You might say a small lie is harmless, one small act of selfishness forgivable. But if each small wrong builds on the last, when do you become dishonest? When do you become unkind? And who decides where that line is? No one lie makes the label true, but the pattern begins to form. And that is where the paradox lives, in the space between intent and habit, between the one act and the many. Or picture this in the way we change ourselves. You eat one healthy meal, you skip one workout, you stay up late one night. It feels like nothing. But add them up over weeks, over months, and soon you are someone different. Not because of a single moment, but because of a slow building of grains, a slow falling away of old patterns. And maybe that is the answer hidden inside the paradox. Not a solution, but a shift. A soft truth that says life is made of small choices, and each one matters. Even if no single one changes everything. The man now stands before a small pile of sand. He smiles. It is not clear when the change happened, but it did. And maybe the lesson is this: in a world of soft lines, our awareness becomes the tool that helps us navigate. Not to find perfect answers, but to move with care, to label with love, to know that every grain counts, even the ones we barely notice, especially the ones we barely notice. Fatalism. Picture this boy sitting alone on the steps of an old temple. The sun is setting behind the hills, painting the sky in deep orange and blue. He holds a letter in his hand, a rejection from the college he dreamed of. He stares at it for a long time. Then he looks up at the sky and whispers, "Maybe it was meant to be. Maybe no matter what I did, this was always going to happen." That quiet thought, that sense of powerlessness wrapped in peace, is where fatalism begins. It is the belief that whatever is going to happen will happen, no matter what you do, that the path is already written, that the future is fixed, and that our choices, while they may feel important, cannot truly change what is destined to come. It sounds comforting to some, and suffocating to others. But for many, it starts with that feeling that no matter how hard you try, some things just seem out of reach. Some things just unfold, with or without your effort. Fatalism is not quite the same as determinism, though they are often confused. Determinism says that every event is caused by something before it, like dominoes falling one after another, with no randomness. But fatalism is different. Fatalism says that certain outcomes are going to happen, even if the steps to reach them change. You might try to avoid something, and in the trying, you walk right into it. You might hope for something, but even your hope cannot bring it closer if it was never meant for you. It is the idea that the future is locked, and we are just moving through it. Some people hear this and feel hopeless. They say, if everything is already decided, why bother? Why try? Why care? But fatalism is not always about despair. Sometimes it brings a strange kind of peace, like floating in a river instead of fighting the current. You still move, you still feel, you still breathe. But you stop believing that control is everything. And in that letting go, there is relief. Because life is heavy. So many choices, so many roads, so many unknowns. Fatalism says, what if you don't have to carry all that weight? What if what's meant for you will find you, and what isn't, no matter how tightly you hold on, will slip away? The awareness-amnesia paradox appears here too, hidden like a soft shadow behind the thought. You are aware that you make choices. You feel yourself deciding, changing, shaping your life. But you forget how many things were never in your hands to begin with. Where you were born, who raised you, what your body can do, what your heart fell in love with. You forget how much of your life happened before you even began making decisions. And maybe, in remembering that, fatalism starts to feel familiar, like something you always knew, but never named. Still, fatalism asks a hard question. If everything is going to happen as it must, what role do you really play? Are you a character? Or an author? Are you writing the story? Or just reading the lines already printed on the page? This is where the paradox deepens. Because even if the future is fixed, we still feel, we still struggle, we still learn. And that experience is real. Even if the destination is set, the journey still matters. You may not be able to change the ending, but you can change how you walk toward it. With love, with courage, with grace, or with fear, with anger, with regret. The path may be written, but how you walk it is still yours. That is what makes the idea of fatalism so strange. It does not remove meaning. It simply shifts it from the power of changing outcomes to the power of meeting outcomes with presence, with dignity, with peace. You still choose how to show up, even if you do not choose what comes. The boy folds the letter and places it in his pocket. He does not know what will come next. Maybe something better, maybe something harder. But for the first time in days, he lets go of trying to force the future. He watches the last light fade from the sky, and he breathes, not because everything is okay, but because maybe it will be, and if it won't, he will still be here, still trying, still living, still walking the path, whether or not it was written long before he took his first step. The Ship of Theseus. Picture this man standing at the edge of a quiet harbor. The sea is still. A wooden ship rests beside the dock, its sails folded, its ropes swaying gently in the wind. The locals say this is the very same ship that once belonged to Theseus, the legendary hero of Athens. Every year, a few old planks rot and are replaced. First a board on the side, then a mast, then part of the deck. One by one, over the years, each piece is carefully swapped out, until one day none of the original wood remains. And yet the townspeople still call it the Ship of Theseus. Is it the same ship, or is it something entirely new? This is not just a riddle about boats. It is a question about identity, change, and what it really means for something to stay itself. The Ship of Theseus is one of the oldest paradoxes in Western philosophy. At first it seems simple. If something is slowly changed, piece by piece, is it still the same thing? But the longer you sit with the question, the more it begins to stretch beyond ships. It begins to whisper about your body, your memories, your beliefs, and your sense of self. You are not born with the same body you have now. Your cells have been replaced over time. Your thoughts have changed. The people in your life have come and gone, and yet you still say, "This is me," as if some thread connects the child you were to the person you are now. But what is that thread? And where does it live? Let us return to the ship. Every year, the dock workers remove an old plank and replace it with a new one. The new plank is made from similar wood. It looks the same. It functions the same. And it is placed exactly where the old one stood. No one notices the change. The ship sails on. People climb aboard, tell stories, take pictures. They say, "This is the same ship that carried Theseus himself." And in that saying, something strange happens. It becomes true, because identity is not just in the parts, it is in the story, in the belief, in the shared agreement that this ship, though rebuilt, is still the same. The awareness-amnesia paradox emerges gently here, almost like salt in the sea breeze. You are aware of the ship's new parts, but you forget the passage of time. You forget how slowly change creeps in, how invisible it becomes when it is gradual, how something can be completely different without ever feeling different. This is why the Ship of Theseus matters. It teaches us that identity is not fixed. It flows. It is made, not found. It is shaped not by a single part, but by the relationship between parts, the structure, the use, the meaning. And once you accept that, a second question begins to surface. What if all the old parts of the ship, the ones that were removed, were saved? What if a carpenter took them and built a second ship, a perfect replica? Same planks, same order, same design. Which ship is the real Ship of Theseus? The one that stayed in the harbor and slowly transformed, or the one rebuilt from all the original pieces? Both? Neither? Or is the question itself flawed? Maybe identity is not about originality. Maybe it is about continuity. The ship that remained at sea, that carried people year after year, that stayed in the same place and fulfilled the same role, maybe that ship earns its identity through story, through action, through presence, while the other, built from old parts, is just a shadow of what once was. But then again, the second ship holds the very wood Theseus once touched, the same beams that once creaked beneath his feet, the same frame that sailed across ancient waters. How could that not be the real one? This is the tension, and it mirrors our own lives more than we think, because the same puzzle lives inside you. Your body changes, your mind changes, your memories fade and return in pieces, but still you say, "This is me." And when someone from your past sees you, they do not say, "Who is this new creation?" They say your name, because something invisible has remained, some thread of identity that does not live in the parts, but in the whole, and yet there is more to explore, more layers to peel back, more questions that quietly wait below the surface of the sea. Now picture this. Two ships sit side by side in the harbor. One is the ship that has remained over the years, plank by plank replaced. The other is built from every original part carefully stored and reassembled by a skilled carpenter. They look nearly identical. Both claim the same past. Both carry the name. But only one can be the Ship of Theseus. Or can they both? This is where the paradox deepens. Because now the question is not just about change. It is about memory, history, continuity. What makes something the same over time? Is it the material, the structure, the story? Or is it something else entirely, something we can never quite point to? Let us return to your own life for a moment. Think of your childhood home. Maybe it has new paint now, a new family inside, new furniture. Maybe the old garden has been replaced with stone. You could stand in front of it and still say, "That's my home," even though everything that made it yours is gone. So, what are you really pointing to? The physical place? Or the memory, the feeling, the meaning that only you attach to it? In the same way, people we love change too. They grow older, they change beliefs, they speak differently, act differently, but we still call them by their name. Still feel like they are the same person. Why? Because identity is not just a list of parts. It is a feeling of connection through time, and that feeling lives inside us, not outside. This is why the Ship of Theseus is more than just a puzzle. It is a mirror, a way to look at how we define who we are and what matters. Now, imagine two versions of yourself. One is the version that has changed slowly. Each year, a few opinions replaced, a few beliefs softened or hardened, new habits formed, old ones vanished. This version feels like you, because the change was gradual, because it felt natural. The other version is a version built from memories the past you, the one someone might remember from years ago. They still carry an image of you, still call you by your old nickname, still assume you believe what you once said. Which one is the real you? The one that remained and changed, or the one they remember as you used to be? And what if neither is complete? Because, just like the ship, you are not only your past, you are not only your parts, you are the process of becoming, a living thread stretched across time, not a fixed object, but a moving story. The awareness-amnesia paradox gently reappears. You are aware that you have changed, but you forget how much. You forget how each small change in thought, in action, in feeling has shaped you. Because none of them felt like a transformation. They were just days, moments. And yet, looking back, the difference is vast. This is why people sometimes feel like strangers to themselves. Why someone can say, "I don't even recognize who I was back then." Not because they lied, not because they were fake, but because the ship has been rebuilt. Quietly, honestly, piece by piece. This paradox also shows up in relationships. Two people fall in love. Years pass, they change. New dreams, new fears, new layers of self. And sometimes, one day, they look at each other and realize, we are not the same people who fell in love. And that's true. The ship has changed. But the question is, has the connection changed? Has the story stayed alive? Has the thread remained, even as the planks shifted? And this applies to more than people. It applies to ideas, to traditions, to nations, to identities of all kinds. A country changes its laws, its leaders, its people, but still holds its name, still waves its flag, still calls itself the same. A religion changes its practices, its interpretations, but still tells the story of itself as if unchanged. A company swaps every employee, every product, every mission, but keeps the same logo and says, "We've been here since the beginning." Is that true? Or is it just branding? The Ship of Theseus shows us that truth is not always simple. That identity is a dance between what changes and what stays, between the body and the memory, the form and the function. And sometimes, when you stare long enough, the question fades not because it is answered, but because it transforms. Maybe it is not about which ship is real. Maybe it is about what we choose to see as real, and what that choice says about us. The man in the harbor looks between the two ships. He steps onto one, runs his hand along the wood. It feels new, but it smells of salt and sun. It creaks under his feet. He remembers sailing on it as a boy. He closes his eyes. In that moment, he knows this is the Ship of Theseus, even if every piece is changed, because some part of him still lives there, not in the wood, but in the meaning, in the story, in the memory that weaves identity like thread through a needle, binding the past and present. Now, imagine this. The man walks away from the harbor as the sky begins to darken. Behind him, the two ships sit silently in the water, one built from new parts but steeped in history. The other, made from the original planks, standing like a memory reborn. He doesn't look back. Not because the ships no longer matter, but because he realizes something more powerful. The paradox was never really about the ship. It was about him, about us. The final layer of the Ship of Theseus is not a question of what is true, but a question of what we make true. Not just what exists, but how we choose to understand it. Because deep down, identity, whether of an object, a person, or even a nation, is not something found. It is something made, crafted through time, through memory, through meaning. And in that crafting, a new kind of truth is born. Not the truth of parts, but the truth of purpose. This is where the paradox blooms into something beautiful. We begin to understand that there is no final answer to which ship is real, because both ships are real in different ways. One is physically continuous, it stayed in the same place, changed slowly, remained active. The other is materially authentic, it holds the original parts, even if they were rearranged. And both versions contain pieces of what we call identity, continuity, and memory, presence and past, form and story. What makes this paradox so timeless is that it mirrors the mystery of being alive, because we too are built and rebuilt in ways we often do not notice. Our cells regenerate, our minds reshape, our values evolve, our dreams shift, and yet we keep saying, I, as if that word anchors us, as if that word contains something unchangeable. But perhaps it does. Perhaps the self is not in the parts, but in the pattern, not in the memories, but in the motion. Like a flame that stays alive even as the fuel changes. Like a river that keeps its name, though the water constantly flows. Like a song that remains the same no matter who is singing it or what instrument plays it. You are the ship, but you are also the sailor. You are the one being rebuilt, and the one deciding what remains. And that responsibility is quiet, but powerful, because it means you can shape your identity, not by pretending the past never happened, not by clinging to every old plank, but by choosing which parts still belong in your story. It means healing is possible. It means growth is real. It means you are not trapped by who you were, because change does not erase identity. It reveals it, slowly, grain by grain, layer by layer, until one day you wake up and realize the person you have become is both entirely new and deeply familiar. And that is not a contradiction. It is what it means to be human. Even memory, that sacred thread that holds our idea of self, is flawed. We forget things. We remember them differently. We invent details. We erase others. And yet we still believe we are the same person across decades. Because identity is not a perfect mirror, it is a living reflection. It bends, it grows, it forgives. And in that movement, we find not confusion, but freedom. The Ship of Theseus whispers this truth. That change is not the enemy of identity. It is the essence of it. The man walks through the village now, older than he was when he first saw the ship as a child. People greet him. Some call him by name. Others remember stories he barely recalls, and yet he smiles. Because they all see the same person, even if he no longer feels like the boy he once was. Even if the person he is now would be unrecognizable to his younger self. He is the ship, the journey, the memory, and the meaning. He stops for a moment, hearing the wind carry laughter from the harbor. He does not need to decide which ship is real, because the truth, he now understands, is not in the answer. It is in the question. The question that teaches us to think more deeply, to feel more clearly, to accept change not as loss, but as transformation. And in that acceptance, something timeless is born. Not a fixed identity, but a flowing one. A ship made of memory and motion, sailing always, becoming always, and still somehow always itself. Open individualism. Picture this. A woman stands on a balcony in Tokyo, sipping tea as the sun rises behind the skyline. At the same moment, a child in Nairobi laughs while chasing birds in a dusty street. A man in New York checks his watch, rushing into a crowded subway. A monk in Bhutan sits in silence, breathing with the mountains. They are all living different lives, different names, different thoughts, different memories. And yet, what if, in the deepest sense, they are all the same person? What if every conscious being is not a separate self, but the same self experiencing life through different bodies? This is the radical thought behind open individualism. A view of identity so strange, so quiet, and so deep that most people never even think to ask the question it answers. Who am I, really? We grow up believing we are individuals, separate, unique, born once, living once, dying once. The story of me begins at birth and ends at death. That's how it feels. That's how it looks. But open individualism asks, what if that feeling is an illusion? What if there is only one consciousness, and you are it? Not just you, but everyone, every life, every thought, all flowing through one awareness that plays every role, from birth to death, from joy to sorrow, from hope to despair. Imagine a dream where you forget who you are and wake up in a stranger's life, then another dream, and another, and another, so perfectly lived that in each one you forget all the others. Now imagine that dream never stops, that each life is one dream in an endless stream of experience lived by the same silent observer, you. Not the person you see in the mirror, not the voice in your head, but the consciousness behind it, the one that cannot be seen, only known by being it. This is the core of open individualism. It is not a religion, not a doctrine, not a system to be believed. It is a possibility, a lens through which to see the self not as one among many, but as the one appearing as many. It challenges the most basic assumption we have that I am me, and you are you. It whispers, what if that's only the surface? What if there is no fundamental boundary between one person and another? What if the deepest part of you is the same as the deepest part of everyone? Not similar, not connected, but identical. This thought might feel unsettling, or freeing, or strange, but it's not as far from our experience as it seems. Think of empathy, the way your heart aches for someone else's pain, the way joy rises in you when someone you love succeeds. Why does that happen? Why does the suffering of a stranger matter to you? Why do we cry at movies, feel pain when reading stories, rejoice in victories that have nothing to do with us? Maybe it's because we are already closer than we think. Maybe the idea of separation is just a useful fiction, something the mind builds to function in the world, to survive, to grow, to tell stories. But under that fiction is something real, something quiet, something whole. The awareness-amnesia paradox begins to stir again here. You are aware of your thoughts, your body, your name, but you forget that awareness itself is not divided by names or bodies. You forget that what you are is not the thought, but the knowing, not the voice, but the listening. And that same knowing may be what lives in every mind, not copied, but shared, not multiplied, but singular. This view is not new. It is echoed through ancient texts, whispered in meditation halls, sung in the poems of mystics. In the Upanishads, Tat Tivam Asi, you are that. In the writings of mystic poets, I am you, and you are me. In modern thinkers like Daniel Kolak and Bernardo Kastrup, each describing in different language the same silent insight, that perhaps there are not many selves, but one self in many mirrors. Each person you see is a version of you that you have not yet remembered. Each life is a role played by the same actor. Each pain, each joy, each death yours. All of it. Now, pause. Feel what that means. If this is true, then harming others is harming yourself. Loving others is loving yourself. Forgiving others is forgiving yourself. There is no one else. Just different shapes of the same presence. Just different eyes looking out of the same silence. This idea changes everything. Not because it proves anything, but because it opens a door to seeing yourself everywhere, to realizing that the distance between you and anyone else is only a thought, and beyond that thought only light, only stillness, only awareness. You have lived every life. You have died every death. And you are still here. You always were. You always will be. This is only the beginning. Now imagine a boy walking through a crowded street. Every person he passes is deep in their own world, laughing, arguing, rushing, daydreaming. He weaves through them, never stopping, never knowing their names. But suddenly, a strange feeling begins to rise in him, as if he's not just watching others, but somehow watching himself in every direction. Open individualism is not just a concept to read about. It is something that can be felt, not proven perhaps, but glimpsed. A flicker behind the everyday world. It does not ask you to stop being who you are. It does not erase your story. Your name, your memories, your emotions, they still matter. But it invites you to ask, who is the one watching all this unfold? Not in theory, right now, the one aware of this thought. The one behind your breath, not your identity, but your being. And if you sit quietly with that question long enough, something starts to shift. You notice that awareness has no boundary, that it is not male or female, not Indian or French or Brazilian, not rich or poor. It has no age, no history. It just is. It witnesses. And that same witnessing is present in every person you meet, not like two matching puzzle pieces, but like one space showing up through different windows. Each life is a window, each body is a frame, but the light that shines through them is one. This is not about dissolving your sense of individuality through force. It is about softening the edges, about knowing that the I you feel is not the only I. It is the same I others feel, through different stories. And this leads to something quiet, almost invisible at first, a gentle humility. Because when you look into someone's eyes and no longer feel like a separate observer, you begin to care more. You begin to listen differently. You begin to realize that compassion is not a virtue to practice it. It is the most honest response to remembering who you are. This is why open individualism matters. Not to confuse you, not to change your religion or rewrite your thoughts, but to make you pause before judging others, to slow you down when you are about to harm, to open your hand when you feel like turning away. Because you are not separate, you are not other. You are the prisoner and the poet, the mother and the soldier, the beggar and the builder, the joy and the ache. Every soul is a mask worn by the same presence, and what you do to one, you do to all, including yourself. There is a kind of peace in this, a strange, soft strength. Because if there is only one of us here, then there is no one left to impress, no one left to envy, no one left to hate, only faces of the same mystery, only voices of the same silence. Even the idea of death changes under this light. If you are every person, then death is not the end of awareness, it is the falling away of one role. The curtain closing on a scene while another opens somewhere else, and you are still there, not clinging to the same body, not chasing the same identity, but still here, still watching, still being. This is not easy to grasp. It slips through logic like water through fingers, but it lives, in the pause before a breath, in the space between thoughts, in the stillness of a quiet morning. The boy in the street pauses again. He looks around, not as a stranger among strangers, but as a wave among waves, each cresting from the same ocean. He does not need to understand it. He only needs to remember. And remembering is not thinking harder, it is letting go. Letting go of the idea that you are trapped in a single life. Letting go of the belief that only your story matters. Letting go of the fear that you are alone, because you never were, and you never will be. Now imagine a quiet night. A man sits by a small fire in the desert. Above him, the stars stretch across the sky like scattered seeds of light. The silence is so deep, he can hear the crackle of each ember. He thinks about his life, the choices, the losses, the people he met. And for a moment, he wonders, what if I have lived this before, but from the other side? What if I was the one I hurt? What if I was the one I loved? What if I was every person I have ever met? This is the quiet arrival of open individualism's final echo. The recognition that the line between I and other is not just thin, but perhaps imaginary. That all separation is a story told by a voice inside the mind. Useful, yes, but not always true. You are the child being born. You are the elder passing away. You are the artist who dreams in color. You are the scientist who maps the stars. You are the broken-hearted, and the one who caused the break. And none of it is contradiction, because in open individualism, the self is not a container. It is the space, the awareness that holds all containers. The ocean that rises is every wave. And what you feel now, this moment of quiet observation, is not limited by who you think you are. It is simply being itself, unfolding, changing, remembering. When you stop needing to defend the self as a separate thing, something beautiful happens. You soften, you open. You begin to live as if the world is not full of strangers, but full of versions of yourself still waking up, still healing, still wondering. This changes how you speak, how you forgive, how you hold someone else's grief without needing to fix it, because you recognize it, because on some level you remember it, maybe not with words, but with presence. This view is not about erasing individuality. Your story still matters. Your pain still matters. Your dreams, your name, your path, they all have weight. But open individualism says your identity is not only yours, it is shared, woven, poured like water into different cups, each cup temporary, each one part of the same stream. And once you begin to live from that stream, the need to dominate dissolves. The desire to conquer fades. Because who would you conquer if all is you? Who would you betray? Who would you fear? You still stand for justice. You still stand against cruelty, but not as a warrior fighting an enemy, as a voice reminding itself to come home, to wake up, to remember. Not everyone will see this. Not everyone will believe it. But even if the world forgets, you can still remember. You can move through life with eyes that see others as mirrors, not to reflect your ego, but to reflect your source. And the peace that comes from this knowing is quiet, but deep. Because no matter what happens, you are still here, in every life, in every breath, in every corner of existence. The fire burns lower in the desert. The man closes his eyes. He does not need more proof. He does not need to explain. He simply feels the stillness that comes from knowing I am not just this. I am all of this. And all of this is one, the Gettier Problem. Imagine this man walking into his office on a Monday morning. As he steps through the door, he glances at the clock and sees it reads exactly 9 o'clock. He smiles, feeling proud. I'm right on time, he thinks. But what he does not know is that the clock on the wall stopped working 24 hours ago. It just happens to show 9 o'clock again purely by coincidence. So he believes he is on time. His belief is true, and he has a reason for believing it. But is it knowledge? This quiet trap is the heart of the Gettier Problem. A thought experiment that gently cracks the surface of something we all think we understand what it means to know something. For centuries, philosophers believed knowledge had 3 parts. A person knows something if it is, a belief that is true, and justified. This was considered solid ground. A simple test for knowledge. If you believe something and that belief is true, and you have a reason to believe it, then you know it. Or so we thought. Until 1963, when a man named Edmund Gettier wrote a short paper, just a few pages long. But inside those pages, he planted a seed of doubt that grew through the roots of modern epistemology. Gettier asked, what if someone had a belief that was true and justified, but only by accident? What if the reason for the belief was flawed, but the belief turned out to be true anyway? Is that really knowledge? Let us slow down. Picture another man. We will call him John. John looks out the window and sees what he thinks is a sheep in a field. He says, there is a sheep in the field. He believes it. He has a reason to believe it. And it turns out there is a sheep in the field. So according to the classic definition, John knows there is a sheep in the field. But here is the twist. What John saw was not a real sheep. It was a dog, covered in dirt, shaped strangely in the fog. The real sheep was hidden behind a rock. He got lucky. His belief was true. His belief was justified. But his reason was wrong. Does he really know there is a sheep in the field? Or did he just stumble into a true belief by accident? This is the Gettier Problem. It shows us that the traditional definition of knowledge is not as secure as we thought, that truth, belief, and justification might not be enough, because justification can fail, and truth can still appear through coincidence, and belief, no matter how sincere, does not always see clearly. The awareness-amnesia paradox floats gently behind this too. We are aware that our minds are filled with beliefs. We walk through the world guided by them, but we forget how easily those beliefs can be built on shadows, how often we confuse confidence with clarity, how much of what we call knowledge is actually just trust in what we see, in what we hear, in what we assume. The Gettier Problem does not just live in philosophy classrooms, it lives in everyday life, in the things we are sure of, in the headlines we read, in the stories we tell ourselves. You might believe your friend did not call because they are upset with you. You remember the last time they were distant. You feel the silence like a wall, but what if they simply lost their phone? Your belief was wrong. Then it becomes right when you hear they were actually dealing with something hard. You feel confirmed. But the path to that belief was crooked. Do you still call it knowledge? And how often does this happen? How often do we feel justified in our beliefs only to discover they were built on shaky ground? The Gettier Problem invites us to pause, not to abandon knowledge, but to be gentle with it, to hold our certainty with humility. Because knowing is not just about what is true. It is about how we arrive at the truth, and sometimes we are lucky, sometimes we are misled, sometimes we are both. This problem opened a flood of new questions in philosophy. Do we need a fourth condition for knowledge? Should knowledge require no false steps in the chain of reasoning? Should it require reliability? Should it require luck resistance? Many solutions have been offered. None have settled the issue completely. And maybe that is the deeper message here. That knowledge is not a fixed thing. It is a journey, a relationship between mind and world. And sometimes that relationship is built on coincidence. Sometimes our minds point at something true, but for the wrong reason, and that matters, because truth alone is not always enough. The man in the office still believes he arrived at 9. The clock told him so, and it happened to be true. But somewhere inside, something soft and important is missing. The part of knowledge that feels earned, the part that rests on clarity, not accident. And maybe that is what we should seek, not just beliefs that turn out to be true, but beliefs that grow from truth, not just fall into it. The Gettier Problem remains, not to break knowledge apart, but to remind us that even our strongest ideas deserve deeper attention. Because truth is not always what it seems, and believing something for the wrong reasons, even when it is right, leaves us with something less than knowing, something close, but not quite there. A thought that echoes, a question that stays, and a gentle reminder that certainty is not the same as understanding. Moral subjectivism. Picture this man standing at a crowded street corner, watching people pass by. A protest is happening nearby. One group is holding signs calling for justice. Another group is shouting that the first group is wrong. They both believe they are doing the right thing. They both feel passionate. They both claim the truth. But they cannot both be right, or can they? What if the idea of one true morality is just something we have told ourselves? What if what is right and wrong is not out there waiting to be found, but in here, changing with how we feel and what we believe? This is where moral subjectivism begins. It is the view that moral truths are not universal facts but personal beliefs, that what you think is wrong might not be wrong for someone else. That morality does not exist as a fixed map in the world, but as a reflection of how individuals experience it. To some, this sounds freeing. To others, it sounds dangerous. But for most people, it is quietly familiar, something they already live by, even if they have never said the words. We grow up being told what is good and what is bad. Do not lie. Help others. Do not steal. Respect your elders. Be kind. But what happens when you visit another culture, where kindness looks different, where rules change, where values shift. Suddenly, what was once clearly right now feels strange, and what you once believed was wrong is seen as normal by others. Moral subjectivism says this is not a mistake, this is the truth. Morality depends on the individual. It does not live in a rule book written in the stars. It lives in your mind, in your culture, in your experiences. It is shaped by your memories, your fears, your hopes. It can change with time. It can differ from others. And that does not make it less real. It just makes it yours. Imagine a girl raised in a home where speaking up is seen as rude. She learns to stay quiet, to keep peace, to listen more than she talks. Then one day, she meets someone from a different place. Someone who believes honesty is more important than politeness. Who says what they think, even when it hurts. To the girl, that feels wrong. To the other person, it feels right. Who is correct? From the view of moral subjectivism, they both are. Because each person's moral compass was built from their own life, their own world, their own meaning. The awareness, amnesia paradox fits here like a soft shadow. You are aware of your beliefs, aware of what feels right or wrong, but you forget that others feel just as strongly about something completely different. You forget that their beliefs come from somewhere too, that their sense of morality is just as alive. Moral subjectivism does not mean there is no morality. It means morality is not the same for everyone. It is not floating above us like a law. It is built within us like a story. And that story can be beautiful, but also messy. Because if there is no one right answer, how do we deal with conflict? If someone believes harming others is okay, does moral subjectivism say that is fine? This is where the idea is most challenged, where it feels weakest. But the answer is more gentle than people expect. Moral subjectivism does not say all beliefs are equal. It says all beliefs are personal, and that means we cannot hide behind the claim of one universal truth. We must take responsibility for our values. We must defend them not with because it is always wrong, but with because I believe this matters. And when others disagree, we do not get to silence them with certainty. We must speak with reason, with empathy, with care. Because moral subjectivism asks us to stop pretending we have the final answer, and start listening to the many answers that people live by. This view is not an excuse to do whatever you want. It is a reminder that what you do is a reflection of who you are. You choose your morality, and that choice is not small. It shapes how you live, how you love, how you treat others, how you forgive. It is not easy. It takes reflection. It takes honesty. But it also gives space for something rare, true understanding. Because when you stop thinking others must believe what you believe, you begin to ask deeper questions. Why do they feel this way? What shaped them? What are they afraid of? What are they protecting? And in that asking, something soft opens between people. A bridge, a pause, a moment of peace. The man at the street corner watches the two groups still arguing. He does not pick a side, not because he does not care, but because he sees more clearly now. He sees that both groups believe they are right. He sees that both are trying to stand for something. He does not need to agree. He only needs to remember morality is not a rule we all follow. It is a mirror we all carry. And each mirror reflects something different, sometimes similar, sometimes opposite, but always human. Moral subjectivism does not end the search for right and wrong. It makes the search more real, more intimate. Because now, instead of asking, what should everyone do, we ask, what do I truly believe? And that question stays with you. It changes how you walk through the world, how you speak, how you listen. Because you are no longer trying to prove that you are right. You are trying to live in a way that reflects what matters to you. And maybe, if enough people do that with honesty and care, the world will not fall into chaos. It will rise into compassion, not because everyone agrees, but because everyone is finally willing to understand. The Omnipotence Paradox. Picture this boy lying in a field under the night sky, eyes wide open, staring at the stars. His grandmother once told him that God can do anything, anything at all. So the boy wonders, in that quiet moment between thoughts, can God create a stone so heavy that even he cannot lift it? He blinks, and just like that, he finds himself inside a riddle that has puzzled minds for centuries, the Omnipotence Paradox. It begins with a simple idea, that an all-powerful being can do anything. But then comes a question that folds in on itself. If this being can do anything, can it create a limit it cannot overcome? If yes, then it is not all-powerful. If no, then it is still not all-powerful. Either way, the idea seems to collapse into contradiction. And in that collapse, something deep and strange is revealed, not just about God, but about power, about logic, about the nature of language and thought. Let us move slowly. Imagine someone tells you there is a being who can do absolutely anything. You ask if this being can make a square circle. Can it make a married bachelor? Can it make 2 + 2 = 5? Most people would say no, not because the being is weak, but because the request itself is nonsense. It is not a real task. It is a string of words that breaks the rules of meaning, like asking someone to draw a colorless color. The words sound like a question, but they do not point to anything real. So maybe, the boy thinks, maybe the stone question is the same. Maybe it is not about power, but about logic. Maybe omnipotence does not mean doing the impossible. Maybe it means doing anything that makes sense to be done. That feels like a soft solution. But then again, the feeling of contradiction remains. Because deep down, we want the idea of limitless power to really mean limitless. No conditions, no fine print, just absolute freedom. The Omnipotence Paradox gently reminds us that even the concept of power might have boundaries we do not see, that to exist within a world of logic and structure is already to be shaped by limits, not physical ones, but conceptual ones. The awareness-amnesia paradox glows quietly here as well. You are aware that words carry meaning, that questions can be asked, but you forget that not all questions lead somewhere. Some only appear to. They move in circles. They stretch language until it tears, and inside that tear, we find the edge of thought. Back in the field, the boy imagines a being so powerful it creates a stone too heavy to lift, then imagines it lifting it anyway, then imagines the stone lifting itself, then imagines the being no longer needing to lift anything, because in its presence, weight no longer exists, and now the boy is not confused, he is smiling, because he sees that power does not have to be rigid. It can be a dance, a mystery, a symbol. The Omnipotence Paradox, at its heart, is not about defeating the idea of God. It is about showing that even our highest concepts are shaped by the tools we use to think, and sometimes those tools cannot reach the places we try to go. Language was built for ordinary things, for trees, for rivers, for love and sorrow and bread and wind, but when it turns toward the infinite, it begins to flicker, like a candle in strong wind, and perhaps that flicker is not a failure. Perhaps it is a sign we have reached something sacred, the edge of what the mind can hold, the beginning of what the heart must feel. For those who believe in God, the paradox is not a reason to stop believing. It is a reason to wonder, to explore, to let go of the need to explain everything. Because not all truths live in logic. Some live in silence, in awe, in the quiet between stars. And for those who do not believe, the paradox still holds value. It shows how easily our strongest ideas can loop back on themselves, how thought, no matter how sharp, still lives inside boundaries, and how humility is the beginning of wisdom, whether you believe or not. The boy sits up now, brushing grass from his arms. He no longer needs the answer, because the question has already done its work. It has opened something. It has softened the edges of his certainty, and sometimes that is all a question is meant to do. Not to close, but to open. Not to solve, but to stretch. So Next time someone says they know what power is, ask gently, can power do the impossible? And watch the question unfold like a sky full of stars, endless, dizzying, and quietly full of light. Deontological ethics. Picture this man walking through a quiet street late at night. He sees a wallet fall from someone's pocket just ahead. No one else is around. No cameras. No noise. Just him and the wallet. Inside is cash. Enough to make a difference in his life. Rent is due. Bills are unpaid. But still, he kneels down, picks up the wallet, and runs to return it. Why? Not because he will be rewarded, not because he fears punishment, but because he believes it is the right thing to do. This is the quiet heart of deontological ethics. An ethical view built not on results, not on feelings, but on duty. It says some actions are right in themselves, no matter what comes after. They are right not because they make people happy, not because they avoid pain, but because they follow a principle, a rule, a law written not outside us, but inside. Deontological ethics asks you to step away from the outcomes, to stop asking what will happen, and instead ask what is right. Imagine you are in a situation where lying would save a life. You could protect someone by hiding the truth. But deontological ethics pauses you there. It asks, can you lie even if lying is wrong? Can you break a rule even if the result is good? Because if an action is wrong, it stays wrong. Even when it feels helpful, even when no one gets hurt, even when it seems small. This might feel strange. Because in everyday life, we often measure right and wrong by what happens next. We ask, did it help? Did it hurt? Did it work? But deontological ethics whispers, maybe the outcome is not the whole story. Maybe the action matters just because it is right. The awareness-amnesia paradox floats quietly through this space. You are aware of your intentions, aware of your reasoning, but you forget that each action, no matter how small, carries its own weight, its own shape. You forget that some things feel wrong, not because of what they lead to, but because of what they are. The roots of deontological ethics go deep. They run through the mind of Immanuel Kant, who believed that true morality is not about desire or fear, but about duty. He asked, what if there was a rule that applied to everyone, no matter where they lived, no matter who they were, no matter what they wanted? He called this the categorical imperative. A simple but powerful idea. Act only according to a rule that you could will to become a universal law. In other words, before you act, ask what if everyone did this? If you cannot accept that, then do not do it. If you would not want everyone to lie, then do not lie. If you would not want everyone to steal, then do not steal. Even if no one is looking. Even if no one is harmed. Because morality is not a game of exceptions. It is a matter of consistency, of principle, of choosing to live as if your actions shape the world. And they do, not just through results, but through example, through habit, through the quiet echo of conscience. Imagine another person, a nurse working in a hospital. She is exhausted. She has seen suffering all day. She is asked to care for one more patient before going home. No one would blame her for walking away, but she stays, because it is her duty, not for praise, not for thanks, but because she believes there is value in doing what is right, even when it is hard, especially then. Deontological ethics respects this kind of strength, this inner compass, because it knows that good intentions can be misleading, that feelings change, that outcomes are not always clear, but duty is something you choose, something you hold to, even when it costs you. This does not mean deontological ethics ignores pain or joy. It means those things are not the center. The center is the action itself. Was it honest? Was it fair? Was it respectful? Did it treat others as ends in themselves, not just as means to an end? This is where deontological ethics draws its firmest line. You must never use people. You must never treat them like tools to get what you want, because each person has dignity, not because of what they do, but because of who they are. This view brings clarity, but also challenge, because life is full of gray areas. Sometimes doing the right thing brings suffering. Sometimes telling the truth causes pain. Sometimes following duty feels like walking into a storm. And yet, this philosophy says, walk anyway. Because right is right, even when it hurts, even when no one sees, even when you are alone. The man in the street walks home having returned the wallet. No one thanks him, no one knows, but he walks with a quiet peace. Not because he gained anything, but because he stayed true to something inside. A rule he did not invent, but one he chose to live by. And that choice makes all the difference. Deontological ethics does not promise ease. It promises integrity. It invites you to build a life not on shifting results, but on steady values. To act not for reward, but for truth. To live as if your actions matter, because they do, not just for others, but for who you become when you choose them. The Anthropic Principle. Picture this woman standing at the edge of a high cliff, gazing out at a night sky so clear it feels endless. Stars blink like ancient eyes, scattered across the darkness. Somewhere far below, waves crash quietly against rocks. She stands there not to find answers, but to feel the question, why is the universe just right for life? Why does everything seem so perfectly tuned? The laws of nature, the strength of gravity, the expansion of space, the balance between chaos and order. If anything had been just a little different, life as we know it would not exist. No stars, no planets, no water, no us. And yet, here we are, breathing, thinking, looking up. This is where the Anthropic Principle begins, not as a solution, but as a whisper that says, maybe the universe is not just suited for life by chance. Maybe the very fact that we are here to ask why is part of the answer. The Anthropic Principle is not one idea. It is a family of thoughts, a soft thread running through physics, philosophy, and cosmology. It does not change the facts of science. It simply points to something strange. We live in a universe that allows life to exist, and we are aware of it. That awareness loops back on itself, and inside that loop, something starts to glow. There are two main ways people describe this principle. The first is simple. It says, of course, the universe looks suited to life, because if it were not, we would not be here to notice. This is the weak Anthropic Principle. It does not say the universe was made for us, only that we happen to be in a part of it where life is possible. Like someone waking up in a hotel room and saying, "This room fits me perfectly." But maybe there are millions of rooms, and only in this one could someone wake up at all. It is not a miracle. It is a selection. We are here because we can be. But the strong Anthropic Principle steps deeper. It asks, what if the universe must be this way? What if the laws of nature are not just one roll of the cosmic dice? What if they are shaped by the fact that conscious beings will exist? It sounds almost backwards, almost mystical. But this idea has been explored by thinkers, scientists, and dreamers alike. Because the more we learn about the universe, the more it seems that life depends on an almost impossible balance. The strength of the electromagnetic force, the rate of cosmic inflation, the mass of the electron. If any of these were even slightly off, life would not happen. Not just life on Earth, but life anywhere. And so the question lingers, why is the universe just right? The Anthropic Principle does not give an answer. It reminds us that the question itself is shaped by our presence, that we are not just looking at the universe, we are the universe looking at itself. The awareness amnesia paradox glows here too. You are aware that you are conscious, aware that you are alive, aware that the universe exists. But you forget that your awareness is part of the puzzle, that your ability to ask why is itself something rare, something strange, something that bends the question back toward the questioner. And this leads to wonder, to mystery, to something like reverence, not because the universe is small and understood, but because it is vast and still unknown. The woman on the cliff takes a deep breath. She feels no closer to the answer, but she feels closer to the silence behind the question, the silence that holds stars and atoms and thoughts. She turns away from the cliff, walking slowly down the hill, not with certainty, but with awe. She walks under trees now, the soft crunch of leaves beneath her shoes the only sound in the forest. The stars are hidden behind the canopy, but she can still feel them, as if the night sky is inside her mind now, asking its quiet questions. The wind brushes her cheek. She thinks again of the balance in everything, not just in the stars, but in her steps, in her breath, in the very fact that she exists. She wonders, what if the universe is not just allowing life? What if it is tuned for it, like an instrument so carefully set that the slightest change would break the melody? The more she thinks, the stranger it feels. It is not only about gravity or chemistry or starlight. It is about this exact arrangement, this universe, this reality, this now. And that is where the Anthropic Principle begins to stretch beyond simple curiosity, because it asks a question that hides in plain sight. Out of all possible ways the universe could have been, why this one? There could have been a universe too hot, too cold, too fast, too slow, a universe with only darkness, or only light, or one that collapsed before anything formed. But we find ourselves in one that is just right, not perfect, but precise, not easy, but possible, and not only for life, but for intelligent life, life that wonders, that searches, that dreams of where it came from. She pauses under a wide tree. Her hand touches the bark. It is rough, but alive. Some scientists say there may be other universes, maybe infinite, maybe each with its own rules. This is called the multiverse idea, a vast sea of possibilities, and we happen to live in one that works, not because we were chosen, but because it is the only kind of place where someone like us could exist to ask. Like finding yourself on the only island with air and an ocean of vacuum. It feels special, but maybe it is just the only place you could be. Still, there is a quiet tension here, because the question will not leave her. Why should the universe be like this? Even if there are infinite versions, why is this one so full of meaning? Why should it hold consciousness at all? Why should stars burn just long enough for life to grow? Why should atoms stick together? Why should matter exist? The Anthropic Principle does not pretend to answer. It only turns your eyes back to the moment, back to the fact that you are even here to ask, that your thoughts exist at all, that awareness is not a given, it is a gift, but the mind wants more. It wants to know, is this by chance, or is it by design? Some say the Anthropic Principle points to a creator, a designer who shaped the laws to bring forth life, to bring forth minds, to bring forth questions. Others say that is just another layer of mystery. That to say a being chose this universe raises another question: who or what shaped that being? The paradox deepens, and in that depth, something ancient stirs. The woman remembers sitting in school, learning about Earth's distance from the sun, how it sits in a habitable zone, not too close, not too far. She thought it was lucky. But now, it feels different. More like a whisper of something intentional, even if there is no one intending. A pattern, not a plan. A song, not a singer. She keeps walking, now among tall grass. The stars peek out again between the trees. They are not just lights. They are memories, messages from the past. Light traveling for billions of years just to meet her eyes in this moment. And yet if the universe were not this exact way, she would not be here to see it. No fire, no lungs, no thought. She stops and sits on a smooth rock. What if, she wonders, life is not rare? What if consciousness is the way the universe knows itself? And we are just one form of that knowing, one ripple of that awareness. What if the Anthropic Principle is not just about survival? What if it is about meaning, about purpose? Not in a religious sense, but in the quiet way trees have purpose. They grow, they reach, they hold life without asking why. Maybe we too are like that. Maybe we are not the purpose of the universe, but maybe we are its voice, its question, its echo. Maybe the universe was not made for us, but maybe we are still part of its unfolding story, and maybe that is enough, not to know the answer, but to hold the question gently, to live inside it, to let it open you. The woman closes her eyes now. She listens, not for a voice, but for silence, because sometimes the deepest truths are not spoken, they are felt. She rises slowly from the rock, brushing her hands on her coat as she begins walking again. The stars above are still there, scattered like thoughts she cannot yet name, each one glowing with its own soft mystery. But now she does not feel small beneath them. She feels connected, as though her thoughts are not just happening inside her, but as if the universe is quietly thinking with her. The path winds down to a small stream. The sound of water is gentle, like a question being asked over and over. She kneels beside it and cups the water in her hands, letting it slip through her fingers. So much had to be right for this stream to exist. The shape of the land, the presence of gravity, the temperature that keeps water in liquid form, the existence of water at all, and even more, the existence of laws that let water behave the way it does, flowing, reflecting, nourishing. Why should any of this be possible? She looks at her reflection in the stream, a face formed by biology, shaped by ancestors, born from dust made in stars. But that is the part that humbles her the most, that this very moment, this quiet, reflective moment, depends on physics, chemistry, and the fine-tuning of forces that reach back to the birth of time. The more she sees, the more she realizes how rare consciousness might be. Not just human life, but any form of awareness, the ability to notice, to wonder, to ask. The Anthropic Principle does not need life to be common. It only needs it to be possible. And yet, it is not just possible. It is here. And that is something profound. It means that within the long silence of the cosmos, something began to speak, to feel, to imagine, to love. She remembers the way the earth tilts just enough to give us seasons, the way the moon's pull shapes the tides, the way sunlight reaches plants and helps them breathe. And she wonders, what if these things are not separate? What if the universe is not just a backdrop? What if it is a process, unfolding in ways that include life as a natural part, not as an accident, not even as a goal, but as a song that naturally includes certain notes, and one of those notes is her. She places her hand on her chest. Her heart is beating, rhythmically, quietly, without needing to be told. And that, too, depends on the nature of things, the laws of biology, the flow of electricity, the shape of molecules, all of it made possible by constants that could have been different, but are not. Why? She does not know. But not knowing is the point. The Anthropic Principle is not a theory to explain everything. It is a mirror that shows you the shape of your own questioning. It says, yes, the universe appears perfectly tuned. And yes, you are here to notice. And noticing might be part of what makes the universe what it is. Some have taken this idea further. They ask if consciousness itself is not just a product of the universe, but a requirement. That awareness is not a late arrival, but a necessary ingredient. She finds this thought strange, yet beautiful, because it means she is not outside the cosmos, looking in. She is within it, a pattern of energy and thought, made from the same dust as stars. She walks again, and the trees begin to thin. The air is colder now, but she does not mind. Every breath feels full. Every step feels like part of something greater, not a destiny, Not a plan, but a dance, an unfolding. A deep simplicity that hides inside complexity. The Anthropic Principle reminds her that even if there are other universes, even if there are infinite paths, this one, the one she lives in, is here. And that matters, because it is the one in which she can feel, and choose, and love. And that might be the true weight of this principle, that life is not guaranteed, that awareness is not automatic. And so every thought becomes a kind of miracle, every connection becomes a quiet celebration. We are not required to exist, but we do. And with that existence comes the gentle call to live with care. To honor this balance we did not create, to explore without needing to conquer, to wonder without needing to control. The Anthropic Principle does not tell her who she is. It does not answer all her questions. But it does whisper something true, that she is part of this universe, not as a mistake, not as a guest, but as a participant, a witness, and in some quiet way, a reason. She walks out of the trees now and finds herself at the edge of a wide clearing. The moon hangs above her like a quiet guardian, silver and calm. The air feels still. She can hear the hush of the distant forest behind her and the soft beating of her own heart. This moment feels timeless, like the world is holding its breath, like something is waiting. She looks up at the sky again, but this time, not just with wonder, with attention, as though it might speak if she listens just right. What does it mean that the universe allows for her to stand here? To be aware? To ask? The Anthropic Principle has been circling these questions all along, not to give a final answer, but to show how the very act of asking reshapes the question, that our place in the universe is not passive, that we are not watching from the outside, but witnessing from within. The stars do not speak in words, but they shine with stories. Their light travels for millions of years before touching her face, and in that journey is the echo of time itself, the story of what came before, the beginning of galaxies, the birth of elements, the fusion that created the atoms in her blood. Every part of her, in some way, came from those stars, and now she is here, wondering about them. It feels like a loop, a circle that closes gently, the universe giving birth to a being who becomes aware of the universe, and in that awareness, the cosmos becomes known to itself. That is not a fact you find in equations, it is a truth you feel. The Anthropic Principle invites this kind of thought, not just numbers and constants, but reflection, sensitivity, the ability to hold mystery without needing to close it. There are many who try to reduce this idea, to say it is nothing more than selection bias. Of course we live in a universe that supports life, they say, because only such a universe could produce someone to ask. There is nothing deeper to it, but that view, while useful, feels incomplete, because something about the fit between life and the universe goes beyond probability. It feels personal, and yet it is not about being special. It is about being part of something vast and knowing that you are. The woman walks into the center of the clearing and lies down in the grass. She lets the earth hold her, lets the sky stretch above her. The stars do not seem distant now. They seem close, as if she is not beneath them, but inside them. She thinks of people across time, the ancient thinkers who stared at the same stars, the scientists who tried to measure what cannot be touched, the poets who felt the same strange beauty. And all of them, in their own way, were asking the same thing. Why does anything exist? Why does it exist in this way? Why does it allow for us? And none of them had the final answer. But they were part of the question itself, part of the story. The Anthropic Principle reminds her that the universe might not owe us an explanation. It might not have a purpose we can understand. But the fact that we are here thinking, feeling, reflecting is its own kind of miracle. Not the loud kind with lightning and voices, the quiet kind. The kind that happens every time a child opens their eyes and asks why the sky is blue. The kind that happens when someone feels love and cannot explain it. The kind that happens when a person looks at the night and knows, without reason, that they belong. She closes her eyes and breathes deeply. The air is cool. The ground is soft. She thinks about how small she is, but it no longer frightens her, because she is also part of something large, something old, something sacred, even if no one ever says that word. And maybe that is the gift of this principle, to remind us that awareness is not ordinary, that being alive in a universe that allows thought is not just rare, it is astonishing. And with that awareness comes a quiet responsibility to live gently, to be kind, to wonder often, to remember that this world, with all its beauty and pain, is possible because of a balance we did not choose, but are lucky enough to witness. She opens her eyes. The moon is still there. The stars still shining. Nothing has changed. And yet, everything feels different, not because she has found the answer, but because she has allowed the question to change her. She rises slowly and begins to walk back toward the trees, not with urgency, not with confusion, but with peace, the kind of peace that comes not from knowing, but from honoring the mystery, from understanding that the universe might not be for us, but that we are in it, and we are awake. And sometimes that is more than enough. And that's it. Hope you're in peace. Just consider subscribing, because sleep matters. Just then, stress scatters and nothing else matters, right? Peace out.